Chapter 503. After searching Batunlu's body, Wang Chong's gaze turned to the corpse of the horse that Batunlu had been riding. If Batunlu hadn't hidden anything on his body, then it could only be on the corpse of the horse. But a moment later, Wang Chong was once again disappointed. Impossible. Where did I go wrong? Could it be that Batunlu doesn't actually have any martial arts manuals on him? Wang Chong rubbed his chin, a puzzled look in his eyes. He had thought that Batunlu would have hidden nothing under the saddle, but there was nothing under the saddle. It seemed that he would not be able to obtain Batunlu's Ksitigarbha secret technique and the six-armed Ksitigarbha Vajra warrior. However, when Wang Chong's gaze swept across Batunlu's boots, a thought flashed through his mind. Suddenly, Wang Chong seemed to discover something. Batunlu's boots looked different from ordinary people's. Wang Chong was wearing a pair himself, but he knew how thick they were. Batunlu's boots were clearly thicker. Could it be? At this thought, Wang Chong's heart thumped. Suddenly he bent down, took out his Wuxia steel sword, and carefully cut open the outer layer of the boot. Clack! The moment the boot was cut open, something fell out and landed on the ground. It was a colorful, meticulous, and carefully folded golden scroll that looked like a piece of silk or a piece of cloth. It really is here. Wang Chong's eyes brightened, and he was overjoyed. He picked up the thick golden scroll from the ground and gently unfurled it. A greenish-black six-armed Ksitigarbha Vajra stood on dried bones and black clouds, its body blazing with raging flames. It seemed both angry and angry as it leapt up, as if about to pounce out. It really is Ksitigarbha Vajra warrior. He hit it so well. Wang Chong laughed heartily. A famous general like Batunlu really did have something valuable on him. However, wasn't this a little too well hidden? If he had not been careful enough to notice that the thickness of the boot was off, he would never have guessed that Batunlu had hidden it so well. Right, there's also a boot. Wang Chong's heart lit up. He picked up the Wuxia steel sword and simply cut open the sole of Batunlu's other left boot. Just as Wang Chong had guessed, Batunlu's Ksitigarbha secret art, which stimulated the potential of his life force, was indeed hidden in the inner layer of his left boot. Unlike the six-armed Ksitigarbha Vajra guardian, Batunlu's Ksitigarbha secret art was just a thin square of paper, densely scrawled with Tibetan characters. Fortunately, I learned the language of Uzun in my previous life. Otherwise, even if I obtained these two techniques, they would be useless. Glancing at it, Wang Chong couldn't help but rejoice. These two techniques were written in the Uzun language, which was completely different from the language of the Central Plains. If one didn't recognize the Uzun characters, it was obvious that obtaining these two secret manuals would be useless. The eagle. After putting away the two secret manuals, Wang Chong stood up. He had just called out the eagle when he suddenly heard a rumble in his mind. Warning! A major incident has occurred. The Annam Protectorate has lost a large number of troops. Lion City is about to fall. Countdown 3 days. After 3 days, if host has not reached within 500 li of Lion City, the mission will be considered a failure and will be completely obliterated. The Stone of Destiny's voice was cold, mechanical, and devoid of emotion. When he heard this icy voice, Wang Chong's body trembled. The blood drained from his face, turning it deathly white. How is this possible? Wang Chong paled. This was the first time he had heard a warning from the Stone of Destiny in the past few days. This sort of warning would normally not appear, but when it did, it meant that something major had happened. Lion City is cultivated by Zhang Shouji. Its walls are impenetrable, and it's guarded by 80,000 soldiers. How could it possibly fall? Wang Chong couldn't believe his ears. This city had been built with a large amount of gold. The outer walls were made of fine iron, and many sturdiness inscriptions had been added to them. The walls were smooth and steep, impossible to climb. When Wang Chong had first built this city, it had been for the sake of war, to provide a fortress for the Annam Protectorate. In reality, this city had served its purpose. The reason why Wang Chong had been able to calmly spend so much time training his troops was because Wang Chong firmly believed that Lion City wouldn't fall in a short period of time. But now, everything had changed. Just what happened in the south? Wang Chong's face paled. The joy he had felt from defeating Batunlu, and the 3,000 Uzun soldiers had vanished without a trace. At this moment, a massive sense of danger descended from the heavens, firmly enveloping Wang Chong. Wang Chong looked into the distance. Although he couldn't see anything from here, Wang Chong could sense that a dark cloud was sweeping in from the south. The southwestern campaign was developing far more fiercely than he had imagined. Xingyu Zhongtong had been defeated. This was an indisputable fact. Regardless of how much he owed this war or the empire in the future, if he couldn't reach the Arai Plains within 3 days, he was clearly doomed. Something that he didn't know about had happened in the south, but Wang Chong couldn't figure out what it was. Just what could have caused Lion City to suffer such heavy losses? "Young master, what's wrong?" A concerned voice came from the side. The eagle walked up from behind, a worried expression on his face. He had been paying attention to Wang Chong for a while now. Wang Chong had been standing there motionlessly, his face pale. This sort of mental state was abnormal no matter how one looked at it, and it was extremely worrying. "It's nothing." Wang Chong stuffed Batunla's golden boxing gloves into the eagle's hands. "This set of boxing gloves is for you." Once he finished speaking, he strode forward, somersaulted, jumped on the horse's back, and raised his arm. "All soldiers, hear my order. Drop everything and advance at full speed." Rumble. Everyone was dumbfounded by this order. These corpses hadn't even been buried, so why were they suddenly moving? But despite their confusion, everyone immediately mounted their horses and marched. "What's going on?" Li Sai rode over and asked. He had also sensed that something was wrong with Wang Chong. "Something's happened up ahead. Move immediately." "The eagle, have you found that Commandant Su?" Wang Chong asked. The eagle nodded. "Move out." The mountain was tall and straight, and the forest was dense. Amidst the howling winds, a black-faced, bearded and burly man wearing the standard armor of a Tang dynasty commandant stood at the peak of the mountain. There were actually very few particularly tall mountain ranges in the southwest, and in this area, this mountain was undoubtedly the tallest. Standing here, he could see everything going on in his surroundings. This was also why he had chosen to set up camp here. Strange. Su Shilin stood at the top of the mountain, surrounded by guards. His eyes narrowed in confusion as he gazed into the distance. "Did you find out?" "Yes, it wasn't a trap. Batunlu really did retreat, and we don't know what happened either." "Didn't you continue to investigate where they went?" We were also worried that it was a trap, so we didn't pursue very far. We only carefully searched the surroundings and confirmed that there were no ambushes, and that there were no problems, before we returned." The scout captain bowed, and hesitated for a moment before replying respectfully. "Got it. You may leave." Su Shilin frowned and quickly dismissed the scout captain with a wave of his hand. Batunlu had clearly been on the verge of launching an attack, but for some reason, he had suddenly disappeared. All of this seemed very strange, but this was not what Su Shilin was most worried about. Su Shilin's eyes swept across the densely packed and heavily guarded army, and a trace of deep worry flashed through his eyes. These people were all people he had gathered from all over the place during this period of time. In total, they numbered around 5,000. But this increase in numbers did not give Su Shilin the slightest peace of mind. On the contrary, he felt even more perplexed and uneasy. General Li had died in battle. The empire's brightest star had died on the way south. Even though Su Shilin had warned him, this did not change the fact that the army of 60,000 had been destroyed by Uzun before they could even arrive, and an even greater danger lay in the southwest. Su Shilin had served in the army for 20 years, participated in all kinds of battles, big and small, and experienced all kinds of dangers, but he still did not dare say that he had encountered such a great danger before his eyes. The 300,000-strong Mengshizhao army and the 200,000-strong Uzun-Ngari royal lineage had joined forces and defeated the 180,000 Annam Protectorate soldiers by the Arai Plains. This was an unprecedented crisis in the history of the empire. The door to the southwest had been opened, and tens of thousands of common people were exposed to the hooves of foreign horses. The Tang dynasty, which had been peaceful for centuries, was about to receive its first heavy blow, and for him and the Tang dynasty soldiers here, The dilemma was that whether they moved forward or backward, there was only death waiting for them. If they moved forward, what awaited them was the 500,000-strong allied army of Mengshi Zhao and Uzun. An army of 5,000 would be like a mantis trying to stop a chariot, seeking their own destruction. If they moved forward, military orders must be obeyed. They had originally come to reinforce the Annam Protectorate. Their mission had not been completed, and their goal had not been reached. How could they retreat? Not to mention, who knew how many Uzun soldiers were waiting for them? Reporting enemy presence. Suddenly, a mournful voice came from the sentry post set up halfway up the mountain. This voice immediately woke Su Shilin up from his deep thoughts. At the same time, the 5,000 Tang dynasty soldiers on the mountain moved quickly. The grinding sound of machinery rang out incessantly, and all the spears and swords were aimed outside the mountain. The atmosphere suddenly became tense. Gallop! The enemy had arrived faster than expected. Looking from afar, one could see smoke and dust billowing at the end of the earth. Torrents of steel surged forward like 10,000 horses, their momentum extremely terrifying. Sir, the Uzun people have arrived. What should we do next? Chapter 504. Sir, please give the order. We are willing to be a suicide squad. The assistant commandants and captains of the reinforcement army said. According to the plan, only by forming a suicide squad and killing madly could they stop the Uzun's attack. This was their only chance of survival. However, as a sacrifice, everyone who joined the suicide squad would most likely die. There was no doubt about it. Now everyone was asking to join the suicide squad. Wait! Su Shilin looked into the distance, and still did not give the order. They were all brothers who had gone through thick and thin with him. How could he be willing to send them out? Sir, the situation might change. Hurry! The group of deputy commandants and captains said anxiously. Su Shilin looked into the distance, and still did not speak. Hey! If we don't make a decision, we will be in trouble. Brothers, let's go. The group of deputy commandants and captains stomped their feet, and decided not to wait for Su Shilin's order. They would form their own suicide squad, and charge into the enemy's center, when the Uzun launched their attack. Wait! Sir! Since you are unwilling, let us make the decision for you. Wait! It's not the Uzun, it's our men. Su Shilin suddenly said. As soon as he said that, it was so quiet that even a pin drop could be heard. The group looked at Su Shilin stunned. Our men? Where would our men be at this time? Looking at the billowing dust and the menacing momentum of the enemy, it was obvious that there were many of them. Where would the Tang dynasty find such reinforcements? But soon they realized that they had misjudged. Look over there. It's our flag. It's really our men. Suddenly someone shouted. Everyone looked in the direction of the torrent of steel, and saw a black flag of the Tang dynasty stretching out from the billowing dust, fluttering in the wind. It's really our men. It's really our men. As they got closer and closer, they could see the cavalry in the dust. Everyone cheered and the tense atmosphere disappeared. With Wang Chong in front, Li Sai on the left, and the eagle on the right, the group galloped towards Su Shilin's camp in the distance. Wang Chong couldn't help but inwardly praise the army on the mountain and the fortified stronghold. He finally understood why these 60,000 reinforcements trusted Commandant Su so much, and why Batunlu had not exterminated them first, but instead turned to deal with him. Not only were there more people on the mountain, there were 5,000 to 6,000 of them, but it was also because of Commandant Su's ability to arrange troops that left a deep impression on everyone. The formation he had set up on the mountain was extremely solid and watertight. Even Batunlu would not be able to take advantage of it. So many military supplies, firearms, and they even dug a moat around the mountain. If it were me, I would have to think twice before acting. Wang Chong looked into the distance and sighed. Along the way, he had only managed to collect a few of those heavy and lethal ballistae, but on the mountain, he could see clusters of cold light flashing in the direction of his party. If he counted carefully, there were more than 100 ballistae. If these heavy supplies were to passively defend, they would be able to deal a heavy blow to any cavalry. But that was not all. At the bottom of the mountain, Wang Chong also saw a huge moat that was 5 to 6 zhang wide and 2 to 3 zhang deep. This moat wound its way around the entire mountain. The Tibetans were composed entirely of cavalry. Those powerful ballistae were one thing, but the Tibetans were also capable of dealing a lot of damage. But even the most powerful divine steed would not be able to leap across that moat. Moreover, from Wang Chang's position, he could see many spear points sticking out of the moat. If these war horses jumped into the moat, the consequences would be obvious. Wang Chong had long heard of Commandant Su's name, but now it seemed that this Commandant Su was even more formidable than he had imagined. He truly has the air of a veteran general. This thought flashed through Wang Chong's mind as he gazed at the black-faced, long-bearded commandant. There were many veteran generals in the army. Perhaps their martial arts were not very good, but they were very experienced. They fought steadily and never rushed to advance. All they sought was stability. There was no question that this Commandant Su was one such steady veteran general. At Wang Chong's side, he did not lack experts with potential. What he lacked the most were veteran generals who could lead troops into battle and assist him. At this moment, Wang Chong was even more certain that his decision was correct. Lower the drawbridge. In the distance, a sound that sounded like a great bell rang out. Accompanied by a rumbling sound, the trunks of a towering tree came crashing down, connecting the two ends of the trench. Without hesitation, Wang Chong squeezed his horse's abdomen and led a few of his personal attendants toward the summit of the mountain. At the summit, Wang Chong finally saw Commandant Su. He was very tall, much more muscular than Wang Chong had imagined. His face was lined with wrinkles, the marks of many hardships. However, the most impressive thing about him was the way he stood there, tall and straight. This body seemed to be brimming with strength, a strength as heavy as a mountain. It was a strength that others could trust and rely on. It was as if as long as this person stood there, no matter how great the wind or the storm, they would be able to grit their teeth and endure it together. Who is young master? Su Shilin was also sizing up Wang Chong. Seeing how aggressive the other party was, Su Shilin had thought that the leader would be a famous general in the army, a veteran general, or an old general. However, when he got closer, Su Shilin discovered that under the bloodstained armor was an unexpectedly young face. However, even though he was young, Su Shilin could see a resoluteness, bravery, calmness, and composure. It was the air of a great general that someone of his age would never possess. Looking at this young face, one would unconsciously overlook his youth and vaguely take him to be in existence even older than oneself. Wang Chong looked down from above, sitting calmly on his horse. Without saying a word, he took out a golden token from his waist and raised it high above his head. This is His Highness the King of Song. Su Shilin narrowed his eyes. When he saw the dragon engraved on the golden token, his expression changed, and he immediately bowed. I did not know that young master was the King of Song's subordinate. Please forgive me for not going out to meet you. Please forgive me, young master. Around them, the expressions of the generals also tightened, and they all bowed down. In the military, regardless of which faction or faction, His Highness the King of Song of the Tang dynasty had the highest authority and was deeply respected by the military. In the imperial court, His Highness the King of Song had always been a firm supporter of the military. In this aspect, none of the princes of the Tang dynasty could do what the King of Song did. Furthermore, as a prince of the royal family and a descendant of the true dragon, his status was not something that anyone present could compare to. Young master is the grandson of Duke Jiao, a descendant of the Wang clan. His real name is Wang Chong. All of you should have heard of him during the regional commander's incident. Suddenly, the eagle urged his horse forward and said, Wang. In an instant, everyone looked at Wang Chong in a completely different light. Even Su Shilin couldn't help but take a closer look at him in surprise. So it's young Master Wang. Forgive me for my rudeness. Su Shilin bowed deeply. His voice was filled with rare respect. This was different from before. Previously, the respect was due to his identity as the King of Song. Now everyone's respect for Wang Chong was also due to the King of Song. But this time, it was completely different. The regional commander's incident had caused a huge uproar. Almost everyone in the imperial court, the world, and the military knew about it. At that time, Wang Chong had proven himself with his actions and won the respect of the world. Now that they knew that the young man before them was Wang Chong, everything was different. At the very least, it would not be a problem for him to hold on to the token of the King of Song. Young Master Wang, pardon my rudeness. The surrounding generals bowed as well. Their expressions were filled with respect. The atmosphere was completely different from before. On the side, Old Eagle inwardly nodded. Wang Chong was still too young. Compared to what he wanted to do, his youth would be an obstacle to a certain extent. Even if he had the token of the King of Song, the crowd would still be unconvinced. This was also why he had pointed out Wang Chong's identity. May I know why young master has traveled such a long distance to come here? Su Sherlin asked doubtfully. Commandant Su, I won't beat around the bush. On the King of Song's orders, I have come here to take over this army. From now on, everyone must listen to my orders. Wang Chong sat calmly on his horse and raised the token of the King of Song in his hand. Wang. The moment Wang Chong said this, everyone was stunned. Young Master Wang, please forgive me for speaking too much. If young master wishes to lead me, given your reputation, it is naturally not a problem. But please forgive this one for asking, other than us, has the imperial court sent any other reinforcements? A vice-commandant sized up the several thousand soldiers at the foot of the mountain and carefully asked, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. A similar hope also appeared in the eyes of the others. This question happened to be the one they were most concerned about. The southwest of the empire was already a complete mess. Only by sending new reinforcements could they change the situation. Everyone was entrenched here. This had always been their greatest hope. No, it's just us. Wang Chong shook his head and calmly replied. There was nothing to hide at this point. Some matters could be explained in advance to avoid a lot of trouble. Although he also wanted to say that there would be a large number of reinforcements, the truth was that the imperial court had no other people to send. At the very least, they wouldn't be able to send any troops for a long time to come. Only by understanding the current situation and brainstorming could they change the situation. Wang Chong's words silenced the crowd, disappointment appearing in their eyes. Even Su Shiping had to conceal his disappointment. Wang Chong's group had come with a menacing aura, and they had come from the distant capital with the King of Song's token. They had originally believed that the imperial court had sent a large number of troops, and that Wang Chong's group would be the vanguard. But no one had expected Wang Chong to say that they were the only ones. Chapter 505. On the summit of the mountain, no one spoke, the atmosphere plunging into an indescribable stillness. But young master, without reinforcements from the imperial court, the few of us here are like a cup of water on a burning cart of firewood. It's far from enough. One of the officers said, his disappointment evident in his words. Young Master Wang, I won't hide it from you. The Tibetans are coming with a torrential momentum. Although we have 5,000 or 6,000 people here, we might be able to passively defend this place. But if we want to take a step forward, we're still far from being able to do anything. Putting aside everything else, just the 3,000 Uzun cavalry outside are not something we can deal with. This group is extremely powerful. If we leave this place, without the terrain to rely on, the Uzun will only need to attack halfway, and will instantly suffer grievous casualties. Moreover, infantry are far slower than cavalry. Even if we want to escape, we won't be able to. Su Shiping looked up to the sky and sighed, a helpless look on his face. How could he possibly be willing to bitterly guard this place? How could he not want to do anything? But now the situation was stronger than the person. If he rashly acted rashly, not only would he not be able to help the Annan Protectorate army, even his brothers would die without a burial ground. As the commander, he had to take responsibility for his brothers who trusted him. It would have been fine if Su Shiping hadn't said anything. But when he said that there were 3,000 Uzun cavalry outside, the eagle, Li Sai, and the guards who had followed Wang Chong up the mountain began to laugh. Even Wang Chong had a faint smile on his lips. Commandant Su, are you talking about this person? The eagle did not stand on courtesy, heartily laughing as he sat on the back of his horse. With a shake of his right hand, He tossed over a metal box that he had prepared. The box opened, and a round head flew out. It fell to the ground, rolled a few times, and then stopped moving. Buzz! It was as if an invisible hand was strangling everyone's neck. The mountaintop suddenly fell silent. The group of people stared at the bloody and dusty head on the ground, which clearly had the characteristics of the Highlanders. They were dumbfounded and speechless. A few soldiers who were standing nearby were so shocked that they couldn't help but take a few steps back. This is Batumlu. Isn't that the famous general from Uzun? How could this be? He's dead? How is this possible? How could they possibly kill Batumlu with so few people? That the group of people looked at the head on the ground in shock. They had never thought that the group of Uzun cavalrymen, whom they regarded as a great threat, who had been wandering around and threatening them, had mysteriously retreated not long ago and disappeared without a trace, had actually been killed. And he was killed by this group of people, by the people of the Tang dynasty. What about his subordinates? One of the captains raised his head and said, although he knew that his subordinates were most likely dead, he still couldn't help but want to confirm it. Of course they're dead. Even their leader's head is here. If we didn't kill them all, do you think we could have done it? Li Sai said impatiently. He had come from the army, and was a classic straightforward general. He wasn't that cunning, and he didn't have that much patience. No one dared to argue with Li Sai. Su Shiping and his old subordinates looked at each other in dismay. They were speechless. This result was truly unexpected, and beyond everyone's expectations. In order to deal with the Uzun, they had gathered a large number of warriors, dug up a large number of fortifications, and prepared for a long time. In fact, not too long ago, they were still discussing about forming a suicide squad to fight for a chance of survival with their lives. But no one expected that just as they were preparing for the worst, their greatest enemy had already been killed. Moreover, the ones who killed them were this young man in front of them and his subordinates. Even though he had heard of Wang Chong's reputation, Su Shiping's heart still couldn't help but tremble. This was a battle of life and death. Even if he came from a family of ministers and generals, he was still a child, right? How did he manage to do it? Su Shiping suddenly realized that he didn't understand the young man before him at all. Wang Gongzi, can I ask you a question? Can you tell me how you defeated them? Su Shiping asked. When the Uzun number is less than 1,000, one cannot defeat 1,000. This was a saying that was passed down in the various countries. Even though it was an exaggeration, it was enough to show the ferocity, aggressiveness, and extraordinary fighting prowess of the Uzun. 3,000 Uzun cavalrymen were more than enough to deal with 7,000 to 8,000 soldiers. It wasn't that he didn't believe in Wang Chong, but this was simply too shocking. Wang Chong smiled, not finding it strange. Once the Uzun cavalrymen moved into a trapezoid formation, it would be difficult for them to stand against them. In the past, there had never been anyone who had been able to defeat the Uzun in a head-on battle. Even Geshu Han had used his astounding tower shield. It was normal for them to find it hard to accept. The eagle. Wang Chong took a few steps back and shot a glance at the eagle. The latter understood his intentions and recounted the battle in detail. Naturally, he didn't miss out on any of the dangerous moments. If he wanted to convince the masses, he knew that it wasn't enough to rely on his Wang surname alone. Only by displaying his strength would he be able to convince the masses. This was for the good of Wang Chong, and for the good of the soldiers. It's actually Wuxia steel. Su Shiping returned the Wuxia steel sword to Wang Chong. Turning around, he and his subordinates stared at one another, speechless for a long time. They had naturally heard of the name of the Wuxia steel sword, but they didn't expect it to be so powerful when formed in a group. 1,000 versus 3,000, and it was a head-on victory. Even from the mouth of the eagle, it was a shocking feat. Young Master Wang, you're from a prestigious clan, and you have the token of the King of Song, so there's no problem with us. From now on, we'll follow young Master's orders. Su Shiping and the other old generals all lowered their heads. They were truly in awe. A person who could achieve such a feat couldn't be judged by common sense. No matter how young Wang Chong was, he possessed leadership and commanding skills that far surpassed those present. Even Su Shiping couldn't say anything against such a person coming to take over his military authority. I thought that after General Li, no one would be able to surpass him. I didn't expect the Wang clan to have such a descendant. It's no wonder that the king of Song is willing to hand over his token to him. Handing over the soldiers to him might just be the best choice, Su Shiping quietly said to himself. This time, Wang Chong had truly won their trust and respect, not just because of his status and conduct, but also because of his talent in military affairs. This was the most important aspect. Wang Chong observed the mood of his horse, and knew that he had finally subdued this group of soldiers, and a faint smile appeared on his lips. His greatest problem was that he had far too few people. And with these 5,000 soldiers, the chances of his plan succeeding would be greatly increased. More people. The reorganization of soldiers was progressing much faster than expected. With a veteran like Su Shiping, Wang Chong didn't need to do anything. As long as he left everything to him, he would be able to get it done. In this aspect, not even the eagle Li Sai or Zhao Jingdian could catch up. Thus, Wang Chong had arranged for Zhao Jingdian to be at Su Shiping's side. Although Su Shiping wasn't particularly skilled, he had plenty of experience. And this was precisely what the young Zhao Jingdian lacked at the moment. Arranging for Zhao Jingdian to be at Su Shiping's side was also Wang Chong's intention of grooming him. And from Su Shiping, Wang Chong learned a great deal about the current situation in the southwest. Young master, look. The road south is far more difficult than we imagined. A few moments later, the reorganization was complete. On the summit of the mountain, Wang Chong, Zhao Jingdian, the eagle Su Shiping, and many other generals had gathered together. In front of them was a massive sand table. Su Shiping extended a finger and pointed at several places on the sand table. It's not just Batumlu. The Izan have also left many soldiers on the road south. Here, and here. There are large numbers of Izan soldiers everywhere. Each group has at least 6,000 soldiers, and fierce generals are as common as clouds. They are much stronger than Batumlu. Furthermore, the positions they were guarding were all strategically located. They were all mountain passes. If we want to go south to the Arai and reinforce the Annam Protectorate, we must pass through this place. But the people we have right now aren't enough. Su Shiping made no attempt to conceal his concern. Easier said than done. Even if Wang Chong killed Batumlu, it would still be of no help to the situation in the southwest. Although Huashu Wuzong has already gone south, he has left behind enough soldiers. These people do not kill or plunder. They are only guarding this place against the imperial court. It's rumored that the prime minister of the Uzungari royal lineage, Daluan Ruozan, once studied in the Tang dynasty. Moreover, he took with him many books on military strategy, a portion of which he gave to Huashu Wuzong. Huashu Wuzong's martial arts are secondary, but he is proficient in the art of war. Just this point alone is no longer as simple as a martial artist. Wang Chong instantly fell silent. The Uzun was a brave and ruthless person, but he was also free and undisciplined. To be able to strictly follow orders even when not in battle, this point alone made Huashu Wuzong's abilities worthy of fear. He's a formidable opponent. Wang Chong glanced at the sand table and quietly said to himself. The places that Huashu Wuzong had arranged were easy to defend and difficult to attack, and they were all paths that had to be crossed. As long as they guarded these paths, whether the imperial court wanted to send reinforcements or others wanted to reinforce the Annam Protectorate, none of them would be able to avoid these people. If it was just a small force, these people were completely capable of annihilating their opponents. Chapter 506. These places are all high and lofty mountains. With Uzun's abilities, he must have stationed himself at the summit. One reason is that he can see far from the summit, allowing him to discover the enemy ahead of time. 2. It will make it easier for him to charge. Given the quality of Uzun's highland steeds, they'll be able to reach their peak in a short amount of time, making them truly difficult to attack. As for the forces at the base of the mountain, both infantry and cavalry will be able to pick up speed. This will truly be difficult to deal with. Wang Chong's mind was in turmoil, his brows slightly creasing. Do you know who is the leader of the men left behind by Huashu Wuzong? Wang Chong suddenly asked. Bashishing, the dark-faced vice-commandant replied. He had always been in charge of the scouts, so he was well aware of the situation. This person is one of Huashu Huaitsong's 5 tiger generals. In terms of strength, he's probably even more formidable than the dead Batunlu. Moreover, unlike Batunlu, he's even more skilled at leading troops, and his ability to break through defenses is also extremely formidable. He's both brave and astute. Back then, General Li led his troops to defend, using himself as bait, and then led the rest of the army into the sturdiest of formations, so that not even a drop of water could trickle through. But in the end, this Bashishing still managed to break through the center of the army and break the formation. The Golden Formation is General Li's masterpiece. By relying on this formation, he was able to fend off many foes in Anxi and Biting. But I didn't expect that it would be broken by Uzun on the way south. Another officer added. The mention of Li Jingyi's death left all of them deeply grieved. Wang Chong was also slightly moved by these words. He had also heard of Li Jingyi's Golden Formation. He had heard that this formation was his own creation, and its sturdiness had even made Gao Xinji, Foman Linta, and the other great generals sigh in praise. To be praised by these great generals, one could easily imagine how formidable Li Jingyi's Golden Formation was. Not even the Arabs or Turks could break the Golden Formation, but it had been broken by an Uzun. One could easily imagine how powerful this Bashishing was. It seems like this person's offensive ability is especially strong. At the very least, there should be an offensive war halo that can cover the entire army. Wang Chong thought to himself. Although Li Jingyi had already failed and disobeyed the emperor's orders, he had still died to prove his loyalty. At a time like this, Wang Chong naturally wouldn't blame him, let alone doubt his ability. My apologies, I've embarrassed myself in front of you. After a while, Su Shiping and the generals calmed their emotions and said, Sir, you're too polite. I only have respect for General Li. Wang Chong waved his hand and said calmly. Su Shiping nodded. My lord, we are severely lacking in manpower, and Bashishing is a powerful enemy. It really wasn't a wise move to head south now. What this subordinate means is that we should first contact the other troops and wait for the imperial court's reinforcements before considering moving south. Although the 60,000 reinforcements suffered heavy losses, there were still many brothers who survived. Apart from us, there are actually more of our people here, and here. If we can contact them, we'll at least have the ability to protect ourselves. Su Shiping drew a few arcs on the sand table and pointed at a few places. If we can contact these people, we'll be able to gather nearly 20,000 people. This will be of some help to young master's plan. Wang Chong subconsciously looked at these places on the beach, and slowly his brow creased. The places Su Shiping had pointed out had all been cut off by Uzun's men, and they were all very far from each other. The furthest was probably more than 1,000 li away. If they wanted to gather these people, it would take a very long time. Moreover, Lion City would fall in at most 3 days. Wang Chong had to get there as quickly as possible. My lord, sharpening the axe will not delay the work of cutting firewood. Haste makes waste. This subordinate thinks that we might as well wait a few days and gather the majority of the troops before making a decision. Su Shiping probed. No. Without waiting for Su Shiping to finish, Wang Chong frowned and rejected Su Shiping's plan without the slightest hesitation. The journey south cannot be delayed for even a moment. It must be carried out immediately. Wang Chong's words were resolute and left no room for doubt. Su Shiping and the other generals froze when they heard this. Wang Chong had always given the impression that he was the kind of person who was easy to talk to. No one had expected him to be so decisive. We will naturally follow my lord's orders. Su Shiping quickly lowered his head and said respectfully. Wang Chong was born into a family of ministers and generals, and he had also defeated Batunlu, who everyone viewed as a great enemy. He had already proven his strength. Moreover, he still had the token of the King of Song in his hand, and was their highest commander. Su Shiping naturally wouldn't oppose Wang Chong at a time like this. The reason why Uzun and Mengshi Zhao haven't gone north on a large scale yet is because of Lion City. If we don't think of a way to get rid of these obstacles as soon as possible, and hurry to the Arai Plains. When Lion City falls, what awaits us won't just be the Uzun cavalry. Right now, it's not a question of whether or not we should take this risk, but we have no other choice. We suddenly have to break this place. Wang Chang's eyes glistened as he spoke without hesitation. But what about Bashishing? This person's strength was valiant, and he was skilled in the art of war. He also had Guanguan's help. With just the few of us, it's impossible for us to be his match. A commandant said. Humph. Leave it to me. Wang Chong sneered coldly, not thinking much of it. Bashishing truly was a formidable individual, but to say that he was skilled in the art of war, humph. No one in this era is worthy of mentioning it in front of him. Even the war god So Yung-sun had lost to him, let alone anyone else. Since Batunlu had already proven his ability to break through with an army of 1,000, it was time to test his own skill in the art of war. In a battle between armies, he wasn't just skilled in using cavalry. Have the army prepare to move out. Everyone else disperse. Wang Chong waved his hand. Rumble. The war horses rumbled, and the excited neighs of the war horses, along with the vibrations of metal, resounded through the mountain peaks. At the peak of the towering mountain range, a military general covered in armor. Even his face was covered in a mask. Only a pair of cold eyes could be seen. He looked down from above and scanned through the world. The mountains were silent. A large halo of thorns glowed beneath this general's feet, making him seem like a god. Even the fiercest Uzun soldiers were several zhang away from him, their heads slightly lowered, and their expressions fearful, not daring to approach. Have you discovered anything? Bashishing buzzed from his horse, his voice devoid of emotion. Waves of heat radiated from his body, making one feel like they were on fire. Reporting to Milord, there have been no discoveries at the moment. They've already been routed by us, and Longxi's Geshu Han is being held down by the Lord of Generals. The Tang dynasty has no soldiers it can use. Now all we need is for the Prime Minister and the General to exterminate Lion City, and then all of the southwest will fall into our Uzun's grasp. An Uzun general stood a long distance behind Bashishing as he respectfully reported. Bashishing had an explosive temper and was prone to physically punishing his subordinates. Moreover, he cultivated a fire element technique that made his temper even worse, making him even more easily angered than normal people. Although he was also a general in the army, he didn't dare to go against the 5 tiger generals. Cree. Suddenly, a sharp cry came from the depths of the clouds. A green Haidong green suddenly flew down from the clouds. Something's wrong. The generals on the summit paled at the sight of this sea eagle. Bashishing's brow rose, his eyes shining with cold light. War had never been something he feared. On the contrary, it was exactly what he wanted. Someone go and check it out. An Uzun general pointed at a nearby elite scout. There's no need. Let them come. Bashishing waved his hand, his eyes filled with disdain. Rumble. In just a moment, the yellow sand in the distance surged, and a black torrent of steel quickly rushed towards the mountain range and the pass where the crowd was. In this flood, the black banners of the Tang army clearly indicated their identities. It really is the Tang dynasty's reinforcements. Interesting. Bashishing's eyes shone with a cruel light as he watched the approaching Tang army. Milord, it seems like it's those remnants. I didn't think that they would dare to come. In the rear, several Uzun generals spoke up. I'd like to see what they want to do. Another Uzun general sneered. At the start, they had all believed that the Tang dynasty had sent reinforcements. If that really was the case, then their numbers truly wouldn't be enough. But if it was just one of those defeated foes, then the situation was completely different. They had fought not too long ago, so the Uzun were extremely familiar with their war banners and armor. In the Nei, while the Uzun were silently waiting for the Tang army to approach, the surging yellow dust suddenly stopped 30 to 40 li from the mountain. What are these fellows doing? On the summit of the mountain, the generals all frowned, and even Bashishing appeared confused. But before the Uzun generals could react, the neighing of Nei horses came from the distance. With an earth-shaking rumble, the dense mass of Tang soldiers actually turned around and began to flee. These cowards are actually running away. Haha, I truly overestimated them. It seems like they didn't even think that we would be stopped here. The Uzun generals suddenly realized what was going on. Mixed infantry and cavalry. Now that they're here, do you think they can run away? Bashishing sneered. With a swish and a shower of sparks, he unsheathed the scimitar at his waist, its cold light flashing through the air. Since they won't come over, let's go over. All soldiers, hear my order. Blow the horn. Move out immediately and kill them all. Chapter 507. Boom! That as the white yak horn was blown, red lotus-like rings of flames shot out from Bashishing's horse and engulfed the entire army. In just a few moments, the 6,000 Uzun cavalry felt their bodies burn, and even their stellar energy flowed faster. In the neigh, amidst the fierce neighing of horses and a cloud of dust, the dense ranks of Uzun cavalry charged down from the summit in pursuit of Wang Chang's forces. At the same time, in a place several dozen li from the pass the Uzun were guarding, although it was quiet, the atmosphere was extremely tense. "My lord, will this really work?" Commandant Su worriedly asked as he followed at Wang Chang's side. His 5,000 brothers were all with him, and the 6,000 Uzun elite cavalry were right in front of them. This was no joke. Zhao Jingdian Li Sai and the eagle also felt their hearts sink. Although they wanted to say on behalf of Wang Chong that it would definitely work, not even they had any confidence in this matter. The fact that the Uzun had waited so long to make trouble meant that they had clearly come prepared. And they had all personally experienced the power of these people. If we don't try, how will we know? At a time like this, the only person who could maintain a relaxed and carefree demeanor was Wang Chong. He had seen this kind of scene too many times. Although he still looked like a teenager, his temperament had already far surpassed his age. "Commandant Su, have you prepared those shields?" Wang Chong asked. "They've all been prepared." Commandant Su immediately gave a serious nod. When facing a cavalry that could run at full speed and reach peak strength, shields were necessary for infantry to contend against them. Su Shiping had only dared to rely on the mountain to challenge Batunlu, because he had collected chests after chests of sturdy shields. Su Shiping had originally planned to use these shields to deal with Batunlu. In the end, Batunlu didn't get to use it. Instead, Wang Chong used it to deal with the even more formidable Bashishing. "That's good." Wang Chong nodded with a confident and composed expression, as if nothing could ever make him feel flustered. "The eagle, release your bird and see if Bashishing has caught up." "Yes." The eagle nodded and quickly released a giant eagle. In just a moment, a sharp cry was heard. "He's here." The eagle's expression tensed up when he heard this shrill cry. He didn't sound nervous, but the more he fought, the more he sensed danger. "Let's go. Follow our original plan and head up the mountain." Wang Chong waved his right hand and said without the slightest hesitation. Turning around, Wang Chong waved his right hand, his finger pointing straight at a distant mountain behind him. In this region, other than the pass guarded by the Uzun soldiers, this was the highest mountain in a radius of 100 li. This mountain was not very tall, but it was extremely steep, like a massive sword thrust into the earth. More importantly, the back of this mountain was a 1,000-foot cliff. No matter how formidable the Uzun cavalry were, they could not charge up the mountain from the back. This was the place Wang Chong had chosen after observing the sand table. The group quickly retreated, surging like the tide. It only took a few moments for them to reach the top of the mountain. Rumble! The earth quaked. Not long after Wang Chong's group retreated, a cloud of dust rose up. 6,000 Uzun cavalry charged out like a raging inferno. Their leader was the heavily armored Bashishing, only his cold eyes visible. The Tang army this time is a little smart. Knowing that they can't run, they might as well stop running. Bashishing gazed at the Tang army charging up the mountain, his lips curling into a mocking smile. "My lord is right. This time they're smart." An Uzun officer agreed. No one had ever heard of someone with 2 legs running faster than someone with 4 legs. It was one thing if these Tang army were purely cavalry, but they were a mix of infantry and cavalry. To think that they could escape from the Uzun cavalry was simply wishful thinking. Although escaping to the mountain might not guarantee their survival, it was at least an expedient measure. "My lord, should we attack?" Behind Bashishing, another Uzun officer probed. This was an excellent opportunity to attack. With the strength of their 6,000 cavalry, they would definitely be able to wipe out the Tang army. "There's no need." Unexpectedly, Bashishing raised an arm and rejected this officer's suggestion. "Since they're not running anymore, there's even less of a need to rush." Bashishing's eyes flashed with a cold smile. "We'll stand guard here for now. Once General Xiangyang Dalu arrives, we can join forces and attack. It won't be too late to exterminate this Tang army." He never did anything he wasn't confident in. If he charged forward now, he could still exterminate the Tang army. But if he could exterminate them while suffering fewer losses, why wouldn't he do so? Killing was an art. How to kill as many enemies as possible while preserving oneself. This was the art of war. A principle that he had comprehended from the art of war of the Central Plains that Lord Huashu Wuzong had given him. This was also the true reason he was ranked among the 5 tiger generals of the Ngari royal lineage. "Yes, my lord." The officers froze for a moment, but they quickly nodded and said no more. "My lord, why aren't they attacking anymore?" At the base of the mountain, the strange movements of the Uzun army caused everyone to frown. Uzun was a fierce and combative person. When he saw an enemy, he wouldn't think too much. He immediately chased after them and wouldn't let them go, just like a vicious dog. This characteristic of the Uzun people was common in the world. Now that the prey was right in front of them, the Uzun people did not make a move. This was really not their style and characteristic. "My lord, will they not come?" An Tang officer said, unable to tell if he was happy or disappointed. "Don't worry. He's just waiting for reinforcements." Wang Chong smiled. "Know yourself and know your enemy, and you will never be defeated." Compared to Batunlu, he actually knew more about Huashu Wuzong's 5 tiger generals. The prey was right in front of him, but he would bide his time and easily give up. This was definitely not Bashishing's style. On the contrary, the firehound Bashishing's unique trait was its unrelenting bite, piercing through bone and flesh until it latched onto the throat and cut off the last breath of the enemy. Firehound Bashishing. It seems like they really didn't overestimate you at all. No wonder you were able to pierce through Li Jingyi's central army. In the Uzun Ngari royal lineage, you can be considered the number 1 figure. Wang Chong quietly said to himself as he gazed at that abnormally stalwart figure in the distance. The Uzun people relied on martial strength, not intelligence, to dominate the world. The art of war and strategy had never been their forte. It was already quite good for the Uzun Ngari royal lineage to have a strategist like Daluan Ruozan. For Bashishing to be praised by Daluan Ruozan in his last life, one could easily imagine his strength. Later on, Wang Chong had also heard many of his views on the art of war. He had to admit that although Uzun's art of war came from the Central Plains, many of Bashishing's methods of leading troops were so accurate that they would make the Han generals of the Central Plains blush with shame. But that was all. "My lord, while the other Uzun reinforcements have yet to arrive, should we take the initiative to attack and defeat them? Otherwise, once they join forces, we'll be in danger." One of Su Shiping's lieutenants said with an uneasy look on his face. "No." Wang Chong flicked his sleeve and firmly rejected the idea. "Bashishing wants nothing more than for us to leave the mountain and take the initiative to attack. If that really is the case, there's no need for reinforcements to arrive. He can defeat us right now. With just the few of us, there's no way we can defeat 6,000 Uzun cavalry." When the number of soldiers fell short of the enemy, one had to use strategy to win. Face-to-face confrontation was often the worst plan. Wang Chong had once commanded a large number of cavalry, so he was well aware that the more cavalry there were, the more powerful they were. This was not a plus or minus sign, but an exponential increase in strength. In these circumstances, attacking with a mixture of 8,000 infantry and cavalry was definitely the worst plan. "My lord, then what do we do? There are 2 groups of Uzun cavalry here. 6,000 is already hard enough to deal with. If another 5,000 or 10,000 Uzun cavalry arrive, we'll be doomed." The officer speaking had a nervous expression, his expression shifting. Even Batunlu's 3,000 men had been able to force them into a corner, not daring to move half a step from the mountain. Now that another 10,000 Uzun cavalry had arrived, all of them would probably die without a grave. Not necessarily. Wang Chong waved his hand disapprovingly. I have my own plans. In any case, all you need to do is listen to my orders. Commandant Su, the battle is imminent. I don't want to hear such words that shake the morale of the army. If something like this happens again, you know what to do, right? Wang Chong turned his head, his gaze cold as he looked at the surrounding officers. Everyone felt a chill in their hearts, not daring to meet the gaze of this teenager. Compassion does not command soldiers. The army was not a game. Blindly relying on benevolence and conciliation would not intimidate the hearts of the people. This was the morality of the Confucian school, not the militarists. Without sufficient resolve, willpower, and daring, one would be thrown into disarray at a crucial moment. When the time came, it would not just be oneself, but thousands of soldiers. The commander-in-chief held the lives of the army in his hands. If one did not understand this principle, they would not be allowed to sit in this position. My lord, be at ease. This subordinate knows what to do. Commandant Su bowed and said without hesitation. Wang Chong gave a slight nod and said no more. The more soldiers Han Xian had, the better. The effect of 1,000 soldiers and 8,000 soldiers was completely different, and the effect of relying on the terrain was also different. Even though Bashishing had come with a ferocious momentum, with 8,000 soldiers, Wang Chong already had the strength of an army. The power displayed by a troop of 1,000 people was completely different from that of an army. Even if another 5,000 soldiers came, Wang Chong would not fear them. In his last life, he had led a similar army against even more formidable foes. Why would he care about a trifling Bashishing? Rumble. Time flew by, and Uzun's cavalry arrived much faster than expected. Chapter 508. They're here. So fast. On the mountain, everyone felt their hearts tighten at this sight. The Uzun were all natural-born cavalry. Whether or not they understood the art of war, they were still the strongest enemy. Nearby, Bashishing's 6,000 cavalry also began to move. Turning around, the sand churning, they began to move to meet that group of cavalry. Before everyone's eyes, the two groups of cavalry skillfully merged into one. The black horsemen were densely packed and as vast as the sea. They were spread out on the ground like black ocean waves, and it was an extremely shocking sight. What was even more shocking was that this army still maintained extremely strict discipline. My lord, Xiangyang Dalu has come to report. My lord, please give the order for what to do next. Xiangyang Dalu cupped his fists and lowered his head. Xiangyang Dalu was dressed in armor and wielding a pitch-black spear. His entire body exuded a vast aura, making him seem like a fierce general. But before Bashishing, Xiangyang Dalu was still a head lower. Bashishing nodded in satisfaction. He had the seal of Great General Huashu Wuzong on him. In this place he had absolute authority. It's about time. Get ready. We'll completely exterminate that Tang army on the mountain. Bashishing turned his head and gazed at the distant mountain, his cold eyes exuding an aura that could destroy all things in the world. Since Xiangyang Dalu had arrived, and there was nothing to worry about. No matter what tricks this Tang army had up their sleeves, or how many people they had, only death awaited them. Rumble. In the next moment, the desolate, deep, and extremely distant yak horns began to blare. With this charge, the vast Uzun army finally began to move. The Uzun soldiers lined up in neat ranks, their hands pressed against their waists and scimitars as they coldly stared at the summit. At this moment, the more than 10,000 Uzun cavalrymen merged into one, as if they were one person. Their cruel and murderous eyes stared at the Tang soldiers on the mountain path, as if they were looking at a dead man. At the same time, waves of killing intent and baleful aura erupted from the bodies of these Uzun. The fiercer they were, the thicker their killing intent was. When tens of thousands of killing intents gathered together, they soared into the sky, causing even the void to distort. Dark clouds gathered from all directions, and the sky was filled with battle clouds. The atmosphere suddenly became tense. Boom! At first, the army was only squirming slowly. Then it became faster and faster, faster and faster, until finally, it became an earth-shaking movement. Kill. With the point of the scimitar, he drew an arc in the air and pointed it into the distance. Accompanied by a series of fierce battle cries, the next moment, the army rumbled and covered the sky and the earth, charging towards the top of the mountain with earth-shattering force. The war had finally begun. At the same time, as the tens of thousands of Uzun soldiers charged forward, the atmosphere on the mountaintop became extremely tense. Get ready. As the order was given, the mechanism vibrated. Along the undulating mountain range, large metal shields suddenly stood up and landed heavily on the ground. The surface of the metal shields were like fish scales, reflecting rays of cold light under the setting sun. From halfway up the mountain to the mountaintop, along the undulating foothills, Commandant Su's 5,000 soldiers and Wang Chong's 3,000 soldiers totaled 8,000. They were divided into the left wing, right wing, center, vanguard, and rear wing. There were dozens of square formations and more than a dozen echelons, layer after layer, densely packed together. The 8,000 soldiers were squeezed into a very narrow area. This was a strategy that Wang Chong had modified based on Commandant Su's arrangements. When faced with the wave after wave of echelon formation attacks from the Uzun soldiers, only a dense formation could withstand the cavalry's charge. A storm was brewing. On the mountaintop, the atmosphere was somber and deathly silent. Everyone firmly gripped the sabers, spears, shields, and axes in their hands. Their gazes were fixed on the foot of the mountain, on the black tide that was surging toward them. The military system of the Tang dynasty, which had been passed down for centuries, was on full display. Even though they were nervous, even though they were facing a powerful enemy, not a single person retreated. A soldier's duty was to obey orders. No matter who the opponent was, once a military order was given, whether it was the regular army or the reserves, they would unswervingly carry out the order. Rumble. As the war horses galloped forward, Uzun got closer and closer. Every step seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 caddies. The enormous force traveled to the ground, causing the entire mountain to tremble. Wang Chong stood on the summit, motionless like a statue, his expression unchanging. His calm attitude imperceptibly influenced the surrounding generals, making them feel much more at ease. 3,000 zhang, 2,000 zhang, 1,000 zhang. The Tibetans were getting faster and faster, more and more abrupt. Whoosh! A gust of wind suddenly blew through the world, carrying with it a familiar stench. It was the stench unique to the Highlanders. They were no strangers to this stench. 60,000 reinforcements had fallen to this stench and scimitars. Thinking back to that massacre, everyone clenched their weapons tightly, and many of them revealed nervous expressions. This was an indescribable feeling of suffocation. Young master. On the summit, the eagle, Commandant Su, and the others all subconsciously turned to Wang Chong. The winds howled and the air currents churned. Wang Chong's black hair danced in the wind, but his youthful face was as resolute as a rock, as if nothing could move him. The bowstring was already drawn. The sizzling sound echoed in everyone's ears as they waited for Wang Chong's order. In a battle between two armies, archers would always be the first to attack. This was also the greatest advantage that the Tang dynasty had when fighting other foreign countries. Occupying the terrain gave the Tang dynasty the greatest advantage. In the past, the Tang dynasty had relied on their superiority in crossbow technology to sweep away all other cavalry. Everyone was waiting for Wang Chong's order. With war on the verge of breaking out, even Su Shiping, the eagle, and the others showed a hint of anxiety. But Wang Chong still did not give the order. Wait a little longer. Wang Chong calmly said. 800 zhang, 700 zhang, 600 zhang. They were getting closer and closer, entering the firing range. The opportunity was fleeting, but Wang Chong still did not give the order. My lord. Anxious gazes turned to Wang Chong. Uzun's forces far outnumbered the Tang dynasties. Only by using the first wave to weaken their advantage would they be able to reduce the pressure on the Tang dynasty. Even if it was just a little, it would still be beneficial to their situation. But Wang Chong remained unmoved, and still did not give the order. His handsome eyes were gazing down the mountain, their depths inscrutable. No one could tell what he was thinking. The clattering of hooves was like thunder, and the ground was shaking more and more violently. Looking at the steel torrent that was charging at them, everyone's eyes revealed a look of fear. The miserable defeat of the 60,000 Yuan soldiers had occurred not too long ago, and General Li Jingyi's death seemed like it had happened just yesterday. Steady. When the distance was shortened to 500 zhang, Li Sai stepped forward and spoke, his vigorous voice like a peal of thunder resounding over the mountain range. "You're right," Wang Chong said. 400 zhang, 300 zhang, 200 zhang. Wang Chong still did not give the order to attack. "Raise the shields. All soldiers on guard." When the distance was only 100 zhang, Wang Chong's eyes finally flashed. Uzun's cavalry had finally reached the foot of the mountain. The tens of thousands of cavalrymen seemed to have encountered an invisible barrier, suddenly slowing down and reducing their speed. It was this subtle change that made Wang Chong finally relax. "They're here." Many thoughts flashed through Wang Chong's mind. If the flat plains were the cavalry's home ground, then the mountain was the infantry's home ground. Only by taking advantage of the undulating terrain of the mountain and the high speed and mobility of the cavalry could the infantry have a chance to fight against the cavalry. A truly wise man would never fight the cavalry on the plains when he was at a disadvantage. This was also the reason why Wang Chong had chosen to fight on the mountain. 700 zhang, 600 zhang, 500 zhang. Uzun's men were getting closer and closer, but as the slope increased, the Uzun's speed also decreased. The atmosphere became more and more solemn and tense. The tremors grew more and more intense, until it became a violent jolt. At this distance, everyone could see every hair on the Uzun's men standing on end, every vein bulging. Similarly, every Uzun could see the noses of the Tang dynasty infantrymen and the trembling weapons in their hands. Kill! Accompanied by an earth-shattering noise, the atmosphere between the two armies reached its peak. Boom! A black light flashed in the army, and a huge flame spread from Shengyang Dala's feet to the entire army. Halo of fortress, halo of charge, halo of yak, halo of speed, halo of black burial, halo of fortitude. Thousands of halos flashed, accompanied by the cries of thousands of yaks, and one halo of thorns after another enveloped the entire army. Boom! Almost at the same time, thousands of halos of thorns lit up on the opposite slope. One by one, the generals activated the halos in their bodies and spread them to the surrounding army. Halo of fortitude, halo of strength, halo of combat, halo of agility, halo of passivity, halo of pillar. The dense flames illuminated the starry sky. At this time, even Wang Chong couldn't help but feel lucky that he had summoned Su Shiping. Although this commandant wasn't very strong, none of the generals under him were weak. They had all the halos of thorns that a regular army should have. And because of Su Shiping himself, his subordinates had a large number of passive and defensive halos. At this moment, the sky seemed to pale in comparison to the thousands of flames and halos. Even the flow of time seemed to have slowed down countless times. It seemed like only a moment, but also like countless long centuries. Boom! Chapter 509. Thud thud thud. In a flash, hundreds of shield-wielding soldiers were thrown into the air like ragdolls. No one could describe this power. When Uzun and his horse became one and crashed into the Tang dynasty's defense line, this was not a power that an ordinary person could stop. Hold! Loud and fierce voices resounded through the clouds. Countless orders were continuously issued from the army. All the generals were ready to risk everything, and even their voices seemed to be hoarse. Thud thud thud. The fierce collisions continued. The attacks of Uzun's men were like a torrential storm, far fiercer and fiercer than anyone had imagined. War horses clashed with shields, spears clashed with sabers, halos clashed with halos. The intensity of the battle was at its peak. Soldiers were constantly being crushed, their bones broken, their organs shattered, and they were either dead or alive. But more and more soldiers were still surging forward. At this moment, everyone's heart had tightened to the extreme. Li Sai, the Eagle, Zhao Jingdian, Commandant Su, and everyone else clenched their fists. In a battle between two armies, the first clash was half the battle, and it also determined the fate of the entire army. The cavalry's first wave of attack was the most powerful. Similarly, the infantry's first wave of defense was also the most powerful and sturdy after the formation of the formation. If the first wave could not last and the defense line was broken, all that awaited them would be death. Rumble. The quaking of the earth was intensifying. The attacks of Uzin's men were endless, crashing into the army's defense line like a wave. Everyone's hearts were in their throats. We've held it. We've held it. Suddenly, Commandant Su clenched his fists and spoke in an agitated voice. The defense line of the army had been badly torn apart. Hundreds of shield-bearers thrown into the air by the charge of the war horses, dying before they could even land. But the Tang army had still managed to resist the first wave of attacks from Uzin's men. Wang Chong's formation had worked. Wonderful. All the vice-commandants and colonels in the army looked excited. They had participated in countless wars, big and small, and understood the significance of the first wave. Although the battle wasn't over yet, the most dangerous test of the first wave was over for everyone. Humph! I don't believe that we can't tear apart the defense of these Tang people. At the foot of the mountain, Xiangyang Dala's expression turned cold when he saw this scene. No matter what these Tang people were planning, if they thought that they couldn't get through this, then they were gravely mistaken. Uzin's echelon formation sent wave after wave of attacks, never stopping until the enemy collapsed. Go! All of you get up there. Those who cannot break the Tang defensive line will be dealt with according to military law. Xiangyang Dala's roar resounded through the skies. With a wave of his hand, he gave the order to attack. 2nd square formation, 6th square formation, 7th square formation, move out. On the mountaintop, before Xiangyang Dalu could give the order, Wang Chong waved his hand and gave the second order. The 2nd, 6th and 7th phalanxes. One by one, the reserve warriors took up their shields and went forward to block the attack. A few moments later, the earth rumbled as Uzin's second wave of attacks surged forward. The moment the infantry of the 2nd, 6th, and 7th square formations took their positions, Xiangyang Dala's attack struck the Tang defensive line like a thunderclap. At this moment, everyone couldn't help but think that Wang Chong had foreseen Xiangyang Dala's intentions and had given the order ahead of time. My lord, Su Shiping, and the others turned to stare in shock at Wang Chong. They had never fought with Wang Chong before, so they didn't understand his ability to command. But this sort of foresight was enough for him to surpass the vast majority of renowned generals. The speed of the cavalry was as fast as lightning, and their charge was much faster than that of the infantry. The distance of several hundred feet was covered in a few seconds. If Wang Chong had been fast enough, the first defensive line would have already been broken. Rumble. The battle had reached a fever pitch. The 3rd, 5th, 8th and 9th formations, axemen, spearmen and hammermen advance. Wang Chong stood on the summit, his mind as tranquil as an ancient well. Not long after the second order was issued, the third military order came as scheduled. The stalwart axemen, spearmen, and hammermen roared as they charged into the formation like fierce tigers. Infantry had never been passive, and cavalry's greatest strength lay in their charge. If they could endure the first charge, the infantry would be able to display their strength. Kill! Axes, spears, and hammers howled forward, quite a few of them from the Qi clan. Amidst the flashes of cold light, blood sprayed. Swish! An Uzun cavalryman had just sent a shield man flying when 5 or 6 spears pierced through him. Yusang's cavalry were renowned throughout the world, but even thick plate armor had places that could not protect them. The neck, the face, the crotch, and the warhorse beneath them would always have places that could be exploited. At the same time, pung pung pung, giant hammers smashed forward with the force of a thunderbolt. Cavalry's plate armor could block the stabbing of swords, but it could not block the blunt blows of hammers. When 5 or 6 hammermen concentrated and attacked at the same time, even the fully armed Uzun could not withstand it. The advantage of Wang Chong's choice to fight on the foothills was immediately revealed. Although the foothills were wide, the closer one got to the top, the narrower it became, and the more limited the space for movement. Although the Uzun had more people, they could not display their advantage at this time. However, before the battle could be decided, Wang Chong's third and fourth orders came one after another. Right-wing archers, get ready. The enemy is 150 steps ahead. Concentrate and fire. Wang Chong's expression was calm, and there was not the slightest fluctuation in his deep eyes. Left-wing archers, get ready. The enemy is 180 steps ahead. Fire. Xiao xiao xiao. A dense rain of arrows like locusts whizzed out. The sharp sound was like metal tearing the sky. No one would have thought that Wang Chong did not choose to attack before the battle, nor did he choose to attack at the moment of the battle. Instead, he chose to use the archers at this time. Under normal circumstances, the use of archers at this time would have lost its meaning. But Wang Chong did not have the slightest thought of this. However, the next moment, when the locust-like rain of arrows fell, the most unexpected thing, like magic, happened. Nay! The war horses wailed. When the locust-like rain of arrows fell from the sky, within a radius of more than 10 feet, even pure power was enough to destroy this army. Bang bang bang. Amidst the neighing of Nei's horses, Uzun cavalry and their horses fell to the ground one after another. The sharp arrows pierced through the gaps in their armor, nailing them to their horses. The deaths of 30 to 40 Uzun cavalrymen were insignificant compared to the 10,000 Uzun army. They were like bubbles on the sea, insignificant. But in the fierce charge, the deaths of these 30 to 40 cavalrymen had an unexpected effect. Nay, first hundreds of Uzun cavalrymen could not dodge in time, and crashed into them. Then the cavalry at the back were affected. Some of the cavalrymen tried to go around, but almost at the same time, bang bang bang. The second and third wave of arrows fell into the formation. The cavalrymen in other areas also tried to go around. The cavalrymen of both sides could not dodge in time, and crashed into each other. The formation was in chaos. Bang bang bang. The war horses kept crashing into each other, and the sound of bones breaking made one's teeth ache. 1 wave, 2 waves, 3 waves. It had only been 3 waves of arrows and more than 100 casualties. But in the end, it had turned into chaos. If one looked down from the sky, one could see that the center of the Tibetan formation was in complete chaos, with the area where the arrows had fallen as a line. This chaos continued to spread, and the charge could not be stopped. When many cavalrymen charged to the front lines in chaos, the result was that the front lines were also in chaos. 3 waves of arrows, a few thousand arrows. In a battle of 10,000 soldiers, this amount of power was insignificant. But in Wang Chong's hands, these 3 waves of arrows had completely disrupted the Uzun's offensive. This. Su Shiping and the other generals looked at the scene before them with their mouths agape and eyes wide open, unable to utter a single word. Even the eagle and Li Sai were greatly shaken. On the fierce battlefield, if a few thousand arrows could achieve this effect, then every faction would do it. But anyone with even the slightest bit of military experience would know that it was impossible to achieve this effect. This was not a normal phenomenon. The reason this had happened was not because of those several thousand arrows, but because of the timing that Wang Chong had chosen. The probability of achieving such a situation was simply too low. This was also the first time the eagle and Li Sai had experienced Wang Chong's terrifying calculating abilities and intuition. This was completely different from when Wang Chong had commanded 1,000 cavalry to fight Batunlu. Li Sai in particular had chosen to join the army in biting. One reason was that there were battles to be fought there, and the other was that the most worthy and talented commanders of the empire were there. But for the first time, Li Sai had discovered something similar on a teenager. The last time he had seen it was on the body of the biting protectorate's vice protector general, Sis Hun. But unlike Sis Hun, even though Wang Chong seemed to be intentionally restraining himself, this part of him was already even sharper than Sichuan's. The more he spent time with Wang Chong, the more he couldn't see through this youth, as if he was shrouded in a fog of mystery. But no matter what, for the first time, Li Sai realized that there was something else about this youth that was worth following. The eagle, get ready. It'll be your turn very soon, Wang Chong suddenly said. His expression was calm and emotionless, without the slightest ripple of emotion. Every time this happened, he would enter this most rational state. Only in this state could he bring out the full power of an army. Yes, young master, Without another word, the eagle placed his right hand on the Wuxia steel sword at his waist and turned to leave, descending the platform. As the eagle turned, a fierce gust of wind blew over the summit. No one saw the dazzling light in Wang Chang's eyes. Chapter 510. Damn it! In the army, Xiangyang Dala's face turned green at this sight. His rage made the hand gripping his saber tremble, his veins bulging under his skin. Everyone follow me. I'll kill them all. Xiangyang Dalu had originally believed that the first wave of attacks would be able to tear through the defensive line. But in the end, not only had it failed, it had thrown his own army into chaos. Those disorderly vanguards had instead become their greatest obstacle, used by the Tang army to impede the follow-up attacks. Clang! The scimitar was raised and let out a shrill cry like a bloodthirsty beast. In the next moment, Xiangyang Dalu personally led the 6,000 elite cavalry forward. Those who dare block the way die. A warhorse galloped forward, a head flying into the sky. With the great general holding the line, even the chaos at the front was greatly suppressed. Xiangyang Dalu led the charge, leaving a trail of dust in his wake as he charged up the mountain. 3rd, 4th, and 5th square formations, tell them we can retreat. Commandant Su, are you ready? Wang Chong was standing on a rock. Before Xiangyang Dalu had even arrived, Wang Chong had already given his order. My lord, everything is ready. Su Shiping lowered his head and said, but to be honest, even he didn't know what he was doing. Wang Chong's strategy seemed to be completely different from traditional tactics. Carry them out. Boom! A massive halo of thorns radiated from Xiangyang Dalu's feet, suffused with astonishing strength. Xiangyang Dalu led his hundreds of cavalry like a meteor crashing into the Tang army's sturdy walls. No one could resist such power, and no defensive line could resist such power. As a profound martial realm expert, Xiangyang Dalu was second only to Bashishing. There were definitely experts of his level who could stop him, but not these true martial realm Tang soldiers. Xiangyang Dalu wanted to use his own strength to open up the current situation and completely break through the Tang army's defensive line. Kill them all for me. The tyrannical roar of the Uzun language resounded through the sky. At this moment, Xiangyang Dalu was ready to kill any god that stood in his way. Buzz! But in the next moment, something completely unexpected occurred. Right in front of Xiangyang Dalu, the Tang army that had been standing firm like a boulder suddenly began to retreat. As if cut open by an invisible blade, a massive hole appeared in the Tang defensive line. Moreover, the indentation was rapidly expanding inward. What happened? Even with Yang Dalu's abundant experience, he couldn't help but be stunned at this moment. Having been in the army for so long, he had never encountered such a situation. In an intense battle, this was simply fatal. However, even though he was surprised, the Highland steed under Xiangyang Dalu did not stay idle. Seeing a wavy hollow in the air, the Highland steed almost instinctively charged over. No matter what you're doing, only death awaits you if you dare to reveal such an opening in front of me. A cold light flashed in Xiangyang Dalu's eyes. Not only did he not rein in his warhorse, but he instead urged it forward. In a battle against cavalry, any infantry that dared to throw their formation into disarray and reveal an opening was suicidal. To all cavalry, as long as they could find an opening in the enemy's defensive line, they could immediately tear it apart. In Xiangyang Dalu's view, these Tang soldiers dared to do such a thing. The Nei steed neighed as Xiangyang Dalu led his army through this opening. The army parted like a wave, but when he saw what was hidden behind the army, Xiangyang Dalu instantly paled. At Xiangyang Dalu's level, there were very few things that could make him lose his composure, but this was definitely not one of those things. Ballisti, looking at the cluster of flickering cold light on the hillside, Xiangyang Dalu's expression instantly changed. Behind the Tang defensive line, there were at least several hundred ballisti. These ballisti, carved with powerful inscriptions, were aimed from left to right, from front to back, at Xiangyang Dalu and the dense ranks of Uzun soldiers behind him. Despicable! Xiangyang Dalu angrily roared, his complexion a nasty grimace. He had never imagined that behind the Tang army's retreat, there was a hidden pocket, a trap made of ballisti. The ballistae of the Tang dynasty were renowned throughout the world for their formidable ability to pierce through stellar energy. If it were just one, Xiangyang Dalu wouldn't have cared. But not even Xiangyang Dalu could take these hundreds of ballistae lightly. More importantly, these Tang soldiers had been preparing for a long time. By the time he saw them, all the ballistae had been pulled to their limits, making it impossible to dodge. Boom, 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 boom. No one could describe this sudden transformation. When these hundreds of ballistae fired at the same time, even the heavens seemed to pale. The rumbling of machinery and the trembling of the air completely drowned out the sound of hooves and fighting. Thick ballista bolts, their tips gleaming with a cold light, shot toward the Uzun cavalry like the scythe of the Grim Reaper. From top to bottom, from left to right, these ballista bolts sealed off all the paths of retreat for the Uzun cavalry, as well as all the space they could use to dodge. Not even an expert like Xiangyang Dalu had any room to maneuver, much less an ordinary person. Squelch! Blood exploded. An Uzun horseman on the back of his horse suddenly leaned forward, and without even a thud, both he and his horse were pierced through by a black ballista bolt. The massive ballista bolt pierced through his chest, exiting through his back, and then into the body of a second Uzun horseman in the rear. And then a third, a fourth, a fifth. The cruelest of scenes presented a cruelest of beauty. On the battlefield, ballistae were the most frightening of weapons. Even the famed plate armor of Yusang was like paper in front of these costly ballistae, unable to stop them. Wang Chang's order to open the gap and draw in the Uzun cavalry was now showing its most terrifying side. This narrow and long cavalry formation allowed the Tang dynasty's ballistae to display their full power in such a narrow space. Swish, swish, swish. The sound of bone and blood rang out as one Uzun cavalry after another was cut down like straw. In a few short moments, 700 to 800 Uzun cavalry had been killed without even a groan. No one had ever used ballistae like Wang Chong, and no one had ever used them to such a level. More importantly, even Xiangyang Dalu had fallen into Wang Chong's trap. Bang bang bang. Massive ballista bolts flew through the air like locusts, rumbling toward Xiangyang Dalu and enveloping the space around him. In his haste, Xiangyang Dalu didn't even have time to dodge. He could only push the stellar energy in his body to the limit, and then he was struck by a storm of attacks. No one could describe the barrage of attacks at this moment. Xiangyang Dalu had charged at the very front of the cavalry, so he was struck by the greatest number of attacks. And in truth, Wang Chong had also aimed the majority of his attacks at this fierce Uzun general. Bum bum bum. One ballista bolt after another, powerful enough to easily shatter steels, pierced through the thick plate armor of the Uzun cavalry, and kill 7 or 8 cavalry in a straight line, struck Xiangyang Dalu's wall of stellar energy from all sides. In front, behind, to the left, to the right, the barrage of attacks continued to rain down. 70 to 80 ballista bolts slammed into Xiangyang Dalu's wall of stellar energy. But before these ballista bolts could even get close, they seemed to run into an invisible barrier, and were all stopped. Xiangyang Dalu's stellar energy barrier seethed, but even in the face of this storm of attacks, he only managed to stagger backward, his feet trembling. Not a single one of these 80 unstoppable ballista bolts had been able to pierce through his stellar energy. But the famed ballistae of the Tang dynasty were not so easy to block. Although Xiangyang Dalu had managed to hold out, the stellar energy in his body was rapidly being consumed, and his color was rapidly fading. In just a short period of time, Xiangyang Dalu was completely unharmed, but he had lost 2/3 of his stellar energy. Damn it! Xiangyang Dalu's face was ashen and terrified. For the first time he felt fear. These 700-some elite cavalry were all his personal guards. They had accompanied him on his journeys through the world, emerging from within the tribe and taking up positions under General Huishu Huaitsong's command. They had also participated with him in the campaign to encircle and suppress the Tang. But in a flash, these 700 elite cavalry and his trusted subordinates had died without even a sound. They had once hunted down valiant generals of the Tang dynasty, and had the strength to capture tigers and capture dragons. But in front of these ballistae, they were as fragile as paper. And those ballista bolts, he could have dodged them one by one. But his opponent had given him no chance. 70 to 80 ballista bolts had arrived almost at the same time. It had been less than a second, but it had consumed 2/3 of his stellar energy. In all his years in the army, he had never encountered such a formidable opponent. Even though he hadn't seen his opponent yet, much less knew who his opponent was, Xiangyang Dalu had already begun to feel fear. That attack, which had lasted less than a second, had utterly shattered his pride. In this instant, for the first time, the valiant and incomparably ferocious Xiangyang Dalu felt the desire to retreat. Since you've already come in, do you think you can still leave? Before Xiangyang Dalu could turn his horse around, an icy voice rang out in his ears. The moment the ballista bolts finished, the sky darkened, and a sharp sword chi slashed down from the sky like a rainbow. At almost the same time, the Eagle, Commandant Su, Li Sai, and all the other generals of the army roared and charged like fierce tigers. At this moment, Xiangyang Dalu found it hard to breathe, his entire body about to suffocate. His face was pale, and for the first time, he sensed the aura of death. Ah! A shrill scream resounded through the foothills, but it only sounded halfway before it stopped abruptly. At that moment, time seemed to stop. From the middle of the mountain to the base, the dense sea of Uzun soldiers revealed fear in their eyes. They did not recognize that voice. It was the scream of Xiangyang Dalu on the verge of death. Not even 15 minutes into the battle, the illustrious Xiangyang Dalu of the Ngari royal lineage had fallen the moment he reached the top of the mountain. The battle had ended so quickly that Xiangyang Dalu didn't even have a chance to escape. At this moment, the Tibetans, famed for their courage and ferocity, felt fear for the first time. It was also at this moment that they suddenly realized that the Tang army before them was completely different from what they had imagined. How could this be? As he watched Xiangyang Dalu vanish into the Tang battlefield like a firework, Bashishing's eyes went wide in anger. His hands clenched so tightly that the veins on his arms bulged. He simply didn't dare believe his eyes. It had been too sudden. Bashishing had not even been mentally prepared for Xiangyang Dalu's death. Useless trash, you've truly disappointed me. Bashishing's heart was blazing with rage. His teeth clenched as he roared out these words. When Xiangyang Dalu died in battle, the first thing Bashishing felt was not sorrow, nor was it defeat. Instead, he felt immense rage. There was no question that Xiangyang Dalu's incompetence was simply unbelievable. For this operation, Prime Minister Daluan Ruozhen and Great General Huashu Wuzong had left 3 valiant generals behind. Of these, Xiangyang Dalu was the closest to him. This was also why he had summoned him. Chapter 511. Everyone listen up. Echelon formation charge. Those who retreat will die. Bashishing's eyes chilled, his entire body exploding with cold energy. Yes, General. Waves of arrogant shouts in the Uzun language resounded through the sky like wild beasts. In the Ngari royal lineage of the Uzun Empire, Bashishing's prestige was not something Xiangyang Dalu could compare to. Bashishing had already proved his strength, both in the tribal infighting and in the war against the Tang dynasty. In dealing with the 60,000 Tang soldiers, it was Bashishing who had taken the lead and broken through the center of the Tang dynasty's army. Based on this ability alone, Bashishing had an extremely high status, even amongst the 5 tiger generals. Bashishing had decided to personally take action. The 6,000 Uzun cavalry once more exploded with a heaven-shaking will to fight, and the gloom brought about by Xiangyang Dalu's death was instantly swept away. Who? A banner was raised. Bashishing's eyes flashed like lightning. His left hand took a holy banner of Uzun white yak with a black background, several zhang long, and as thick as an arm, and his right hand gripped a scimitar. Kill! Bashishing shot through the air like a bolt of lightning. His entire body exploded with a scarlet flame that enveloped the entire army. And then he took the lead, leading the army up the mountain like a cloud of fire. When Bashishing's 6,000 soldiers moved out, their momentum was completely different from Xiangyang Dalu's. The massive mountain shook violently, causing boulders and stones to tumble down. At this time, Bashishing's army was still far away, not even reaching the foot of the mountain. Young master, Bashishing's entire army has been captured. Everyone on the mountaintop tensed up. Bashishing's army was completely different from Xiangyang Dala's. His aura was vast and boundless, like the rain or the rainbow. If Xiangyang Dala's army was like a massive wave beating against a rock, then Bashishing's army was like a tornado, connecting the heavens and the earth, capable of toppling mountains and overturning seas. Comparing the two was like comparing a child to an adult. My lord, Bashishing is no trifling character. The soldiers under his command are all elites, each one of them exceptionally powerful. Back then, General Li's golden super ray was destroyed by him just like that. One Tang general after another said. The past repeated itself. Bashishing had been just like this, swift as the wind, aggressive as fire, and heavy as a mountain, shattering Li Jingyi's defenses in a single blow. Learning from the mistakes of the past and learning from the mistakes of the future, everyone felt an immense pressure. My lord, let's send our army forward as well. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to stop them with just the few of us. If the front line is routed, we can only die. The other Tang general nervously said. Don't panic. Listen to my command. Wang Chong raised an arm and said indifferently. His calm tone imperceptibly gave everyone a convincing feeling. Everyone looked at each other, and the anxiety in their hearts actually weakened imperceptibly. Rumble. The army continued to get closer and closer. Crimson thorny halos continued to shoot out, reaching the feet of the army one after another. The air distorted and a faint red color could be seen, as if it was burning. Seeing Bashishing move out, the dispirited Uzun soldiers on the summit seemed to be stimulated. They all began to rouse and join Bashishing's army. The 6,000 soldiers were like a rolling snowball, growing larger and larger, their momentum growing more and more frightening. Rumble. When Bashishing reached the base of the mountain, the entire mountain seemed unable to bear the weight. The earth quaked, and the heavens swayed as if it would collapse at any moment. It's this again. Generally, Bashishing, it's him. On the mountain range, everyone saw the fluttering black flag with the white yak on it, as well as the general who was covered in armor, but was enveloped in a layer of red flames. Everyone's eyes revealed expressions of fear. Other than the people led by Wang Chong, almost everyone here had participated in that direct battle with Uzun. That fluttering banner of Yusang with a white yak on a black background, and that black-armored general shrouded in flames, had become the deepest nightmares in everyone's memories. Careful. Steady. Su Shiping's frantic, heart-wrenching roars resounded over the army. Some days ago, Bashishing had used this method to tear through the center of the 60,000 reinforcements. Now the same thing had happened, and Bashishing was attacking once more. This was the decisive battle between the Tang dynasty and Uzun, at the army level. Either they lived or they died. There was no other way out. And if they could not defeat this army, the Tang dynasty would have no more reinforcements to send south. At least, not for a very long time. Raise shields. All soldiers on guard. Spearmen, axemen, get ready. Orders were passed down one after another. At this moment, the calmest person was Wang Chong, who had not participated in the battle this entire time. He truly is a valiant general. Gusts of wind blew up from the base of the mountain. Standing on the summit, Wang Chong could even feel the heat and smoke of the wind. While the entire army was extremely nervous, Wang Chong could be said to be the calmest of them all. Even though he had experienced so many battles, Wang Chong had to admit that Bashishing truly was an extremely formidable general. In a flash, Wang Chong had used several hundred ballistae to kill Xiangyang Dalu. In the army, the death of an important general was extremely fatal, but Bashishing's order to charge had minimized this effect, and it had also instilled fear into the 8,000 soldiers under Wang Chong's command. The advantages they had in the early stages were basically non-existent. Given Uzun's background, it was extremely astonishing that it could produce such a valiant general. But that was all. To Wang Chong, no matter how strong Bashishing was, no matter how skilled he was in the art of war, he could not change that one important flaw in his defense. War was not a competition of individual strength. To Wang Chong, no matter how strong Bashishing was, it was useless. Just that one flaw was enough for him. Pass on my order. The vanguard will assume the crane wing formation. The left and right wings will move closer to the center, forming a four-layered formation. In addition, tell Lord Zhao to prepare the army for the arrow formation and prepare to charge. Wang Chong suddenly said, passing on his final order. Yes, my lord. Behind him, the messenger who had apparently been waiting for a long time rejoiced and quickly left. All of you go as well. Wang Chong suddenly turned his head and said to the tinsome black dragon bandit elites that Li Sai had dispatched. But young master, what about you? There's no need to worry. The decisive battle is here. It's useless for you to stay by my side. Bashishing can't kill his way here. Wang Chong indifferently said. Yes, young master. They no longer argued and left with the order. Rumble. That like a meteor crashing into the Tang dynasty formation. Bashishing's attack was far fiercer and faster than anyone had imagined. This vast and densely packed formation had blocked wave after wave of attacks from the Uzan army. And even Xiangyang Dalu had suffered a crushing defeat. But in front of Bashishing, it was like an ant trying to shake a tree, so frail and weak that it couldn't even withstand a gust of wind. Ah! Screams filled the air as countless Tang dynasty shield-bearers were thrown into the air like scarecrows. Many of them were already corpses before they even hit the ground. At the same time, hooks, axes, spears, battle axes. Hundreds of attacks surged in from all sides, but they were all blocked by the stellar energy barrier around Bashishing's body. Not a single one of the thousands of Tang soldiers was a match for Bashishing, and not a single one could stop his advance. With a flick of the stellar energy in his dantian, countless Tang soldiers screamed and were sent flying like ragged kites. Kill for me. Kill the Tang soldiers, and you will be heavily rewarded. Bashishing's tyrannical voice was like that of the most ferocious of beasts. Wave after wave of almost tangible killing intent exploded from his body like a tidal wave. Kill! 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 Behind Bashishing, the cavalry began to transform like the tide, changing from the original echelon formation to the arrow formation, which was even more powerful and capable of breaking formations. This arrow formation, which was often used by the Tang dynasty, was now being used by an Uzan man. Moreover, he was extremely familiar with it, not one bit inferior to any famous general of the Tang dynasty. In this aspect alone, Bashishing surpassed the vast majority of Uzan generals, charging down from the high ground, using the echelon formation, one wave after another like the unending tide until the enemy collapsed. Charging down from the low ground, using the arrow formation, with himself as the vanguard, he would thrust into the enemy's formation and blow apart the enemy's formation. In Bashishing's hands, the army would never remain static. As long as he could defeat the enemy, Bashishing did not mind using any method, including Tang formations. Displaying your slight skill before an expert. Wang Chong stood on the reef, his lips curling into a mocking smile. Bashishing's tactics might have been useful in front of others, but in front of him, they were nothing more than a display of slight skill before an expert. Rumble! Wang Chong's crane wing formation began to display its power, and the dense army began to pincer attack from both sides. Childish. Bashishing only sneered at this sight. As long as he could pierce through the center of the Tang dynasty's army, any tactics would be useless against him. Rumble! The dense ranks of Uzan cavalry surged forward like a school of carp in a river. Bashishing paid no attention to the two sides, constantly punching through layer after layer of the Tang dynasty's defensive lines. No one could stop his advance. But gradually, Bashishing's expression began to change. Damn it, how can there be so many defensive lines? The center of the Tang army seemed endless. He had already pierced through tinsome layers, but there were still tinsome more, and it seemed like he would never be able to break through. Plateau Barbarian, receive my saber. A vigorous, domineering, and energetic voice suddenly rang out. Bashishing didn't even have time to react. He only had time to raise his head and see an inconceivably muscular giant gripping a large saber with both hands, leaping down from the sky like the eagle. Boom! At this moment Bashishing finally paled. Layer after layer of Tang dynasty infantry surged in from all sides, But not even Bashishing noticed that when he changed his formation, and the arrow formation was thwarted, a massive gap had suddenly appeared between the front and rear. The army of 6,000 was suddenly cut in two. This change was not too big. In just a few moments, the army would be able to reconnect and fuse back together. But for Wang Chong on the summit, this small gap was enough. Move out! With a wave of his sword, the warhorses neighed. The 1,000 experts summoned by the great clans, together with the 1,000 cavalry under Commandant Su Shiping's command, totaled 2,600 cavalry. Ney let out a long cry and leapt down from the summit like a dragon horse. Tens of thousands of dusk stallion phantoms rushed into their bodies, each one transforming into a halo of dusk stallion. In a few short moments, the speed of this army had reached its peak. At this point in the battle, the cavalry Wang Chong had hidden had finally appeared. Rumble! With a massive rumble and the neighing of Ney's horse, Wang Chong's army was like a sharp blade, thundering into this gap, before the majority of the soldiers could react. Swish, swish, swish. The cold glints of the Wuxia steel swords swept through the air, sending countless heads flying. Chapter 512. Rumble. The rings of light rumbled with a metallic clatter as they enveloped the army. At this moment, the battle had finally entered the crucial moment to decide the outcome of the battle. Wang Chong had hidden those 2,600 cavalry for who knew how long. Only now did they begin to move. Their momentum was like an exploding silver vase, or a 1,000-foot waterfall, completely unstoppable. And the 1,000 Wuxia steel swords had become the best weapon to break through the encirclement. Roar! Kill! The clash of flesh against flesh, the clanging of sabers against swords, resounded through the mountain. Under normal circumstances, Wang Chong's 2,000-some cavalry would have never been able to contend against Bashishing's army of 6,000. But Bashishing was being held back by Li Sai, the Eagle and Su Shiping. His attack was thwarted, and the defensive line that Wang Chong had set up in the center was preventing the central army from breaking through. This gap in strategy was fatal to a war saint like Wang Chong. Cavalry had never been invincible. Wang Chong had known this for a long time. Without speed, cavalry was just infantry, perhaps even inferior to infantry. Wang Chong's 2,000-some cavalry formed a high wall that cut into the center of Bashishing's cavalry, making it difficult for the Uzun cavalry to defend their front and rear. And the resulting chaos also made the Uzun soldiers their own obstacles, nullifying the advantage of a high-speed assault. Wang Chong didn't even need to personally participate. All he needed to do was stand at the peak of the mountain and spread the bane of the battlefield to his entire army. Congratulations to user for killing 3,610 Uzun regular soldiers. Congratulations to user for killing 3,723 Uzun regular soldiers. Congratulations to user for killing 3,845 Uzun regular soldiers. Congratulations to user for killing 6,561 Uzun regular soldiers. Congratulations to the host for killing 7,831 Uzun soldiers. Congratulations, host, for killing 8,843 Uzun soldiers. Countless voices boomed in his mind. On the mountain peak, the wind howled. Wang Chong's bane of the battlefield halo had broken through to rank 2 in a short period of time. And Wang Chong's strength had also risen from the 5th level of the true martial realm to the 6th level. This was completely an additional benefit of the upgrade of the halo. Ever since his reincarnation, this was the war that Wang Chong had participated in, with the greatest number of people and the greatest harvest. Looking at the chaos on the hillside and the Uzun people who were surrounded by his army, Wang Chong knew that he had won this battle. The battle ended after an hour. When the sounds of battle disappeared, not a single battle cry could be heard. Finally, a world-shaking cheer erupted from the foothills. We won, we won. We really won. Ha ha ha. After surviving a calamity, the exhausted and sweating soldiers stared at the corpses of the Uzun soldiers and highland steeds, all of them excited. Countless soldiers of the Tang dynasty had died in this war in the southwest. From the founding of the Tang dynasty until now, it had never suffered such a defeat. Longxi biting, Anxi and Ong. The entire empire, its vast territory, its population in the tens of millions, was actually unable to spare a single soldier. At a time like this, a battle of strength like this was truly needed to inspire the hearts of the people. Unbelievable, unbelievable. On a large rock halfway up the mountain, Commandant Su and the other officers looked at the mountain of corpses and sea of blood on the battlefield, all of them extremely excited. Although they had personally participated in this battle, they were still completely bewildered by it. 8,000 against 12,000 fierce Uzun cavalry. In Su Shiping's impression, being able to keep their lives was already quite impressive. And they had actually won. And it had been an overwhelming victory. If one considered that their opponent was a formidable foe like Bashishing, this victory was even more unbelievable. The son of a famous general, a true son of a famous general. No wonder the imperial court sent him here. Su Shiping almost subconsciously turned his head to look at Wang Chong on the summit. In terms of contribution to this victory, it was unquestionably Wang Chong alone. In his hands, these 8,000 soldiers had probably only been able to flee and die. But in Wang Chong's hands, they had been able to display an inconceivable strength. At this moment, Wang Chong's not-so-imposing figure was like a god in the hearts of the soldiers. Gallop! Just when Su Shiping was looking at the summit, a messenger flew over. Upon reaching the summit, he dismounted and kneeled at Wang Chong's feet. "My lord, we've won. Of the 12,000 some Uzun cavalry, we've killed all but 1,000 some." The messenger kneeled, his voice suffused with irrepressible joy. "How many of our men died?" Wang Chong indifferently said, his voice almost emotionless. 2,700. The messenger knelt on the ground and said, 8,000 men against 10,000 Uzun cavalry, but only 2,700 had died. This was simply inconceivable. Not even the Big Dipper army of Longxi had such a casualty ratio. If he hadn't personally participated, he wouldn't have dared to believe it. And all of this victory was thanks to this scion of a prestigious clan. With that thought in mind, the messenger felt even more admiration for the young man on the boulder. 2,700? Wang Chong didn't notice the messenger's worshipful gaze. He only slightly frowned at this number. In a battle against a powerful foe like Uzun, they had killed more than 10,000 men, while losing only 2,700. This was nearly a 4-to-1 casualty ratio. In any other place, the other commanders would find this inconceivable. But Wang Chong imperceptibly frowned. "The casualty ratio is still a little high," Wang Chong quietly said to himself, his head lowered. He only had 8,000 men. Now that 2,700 had died, he only had 5,000 some left. To Wang Chong, who was desperately short of soldiers, this number of casualties was still rather difficult to accept. However, when one considered the valiant general of Bashishing's caliber, and the fact that the shield men had faced the brunt of the charge, the majority of the casualties were concentrated in the early stages. This wasn't something he couldn't accept. After all, it's the reserve army, not the regular army. Otherwise, if it were the elites of the Annan Protectorate, they would at most have lost 1,000 or so people. Wang Chong quietly said to himself. Almost all the soldiers assigned to Li Jingyi this time were the reserve soldiers of the imperial court, with only a small portion being the regular army. They were completely different from the regular army that had been on the battlefield for a long time. In terms of strength, they were still a little lacking. If it had been the Annan Protectorate, it would have been a completely different story. At the very least, the fact that the Annan Protectorate had been able to last so long against the combined army of Mengshi Zhao and Uzun was already a testament to its strength. In terms of the quality and strength of an individual soldier, without considering factors like war horses, the combined strength of the regular army of the Tang dynasty actually surpassed that of the other foreign empires. "My lord, we've already captured Bashishing. What should we do next?" At this moment, familiar footsteps could be heard. The eagle, his face covered in blood, walked over. His steps were unsteady, and he seemed exhausted. This battle had been extremely bitter. The eagle had the help of Batumla's golden gauntlets, Li Sai, Su Shiping, the other generals, and the surrounding soldiers to surround Bashishing. Even though he had the advantage in numbers, he had still managed to kill or injure many of his men. The eagle had almost run out of strength. If it weren't for the fact that Li Sai, a supreme general with a massive wood steel sword on his back, and the meteoric metal armor Wang Chong had forged for him, and that fearless Bashishing was putting his life on the line, they would have long since died. But the true fatal blow had actually come from the Wuxia steel cavalry that Wang Chong had hidden at the very end. When the army behind him fell into chaos and died, even a valiant general like Bashishing couldn't help but panic. Bashishing had been unstoppable in his descent from the Uzun Plateau to the east, invincible. Even Li Jingyi, a rising leader of the younger generation of the Tang dynasty, a general who had made a name for himself in Anqi and biting, had died to his blade. One could easily imagine Bashishing's confidence. But this confidence had been easily shattered by Wang Chong. Even someone as valiant as Bashishing couldn't help but panic when he heard the screams of the army behind him. In a battle of this level, this was fatal. Take me there. Wang Chong didn't think too much about this. His eyes flashed as he heard the eagle's words. For Wang Chong, the greatest harvest of this battle was about to come. From the very start of the operation, Wang Chong had privately told the eagle and Li Sai that in every battle, if possible, they should do their best to capture the enemy alive. If they could keep them alive, they should do their best to keep them alive. Of course, this was when the enemy had lost the ability to resist and could no longer injure them. As for the reason, Wang Chong had never explained it. The eagle and Li Sai had also never asked. There were some things that one didn't need to know. You are the highest general of this army? In the rubble of the mountain, Bashishing was covered in wounds, his body stained with blood. He was tied up tightly with ropes made of ox tendons and an iron chain. But what truly bound him was the towering giant behind him, the oppressive, invincible great general Li Sai. His expression was cold, his hands gripping his massive Wuxia steel sword. The tip of the sword pointed to the heavens, ready to slash down at any moment. Li Sai didn't dare to be careless against a powerful foe like Bashishing. Even though he had sealed his vital acupuncture point, Li Sai still didn't dare to relax. If Bashishing made the slightest strange move, Li Sai wouldn't mind instantly beheading him. I am. Wang Chong walked over with a calm smile, his expression calm. His first words left Bashishing dumbfounded. You can speak Uzun? Bashishing almost didn't dare to believe it. His first words were spoken in Uzun, mixed with a few half-baked Chinese words, doing his best to make the Tang people general understand his meaning. But Bashishing hadn't expected that this unfamiliar Tang people youth, not even half his age, could speak Uzun's language. The Tang people had always had a high opinion of themselves, and never learned the languages of other empires. The number of people in the Tang dynasty who could speak Uzun's language was few and far between, and Uzun was happy to see this happen. The less the Tang people spoke, the less they understood Uzun, and the better it was for them. Chapter 513. Haha. Only by knowing yourself and your enemy can you be invincible. Uzun harbors evil intentions towards the Tang dynasty. Before launching an attack, he even sent the first prince to the imperial capital to investigate the situation. It's not strange that we know Uzun, is it? Wang Chong faintly smiled as he raised the sword in his right hand and pressed it against Bashishing's chest. In the War of the Southwest, Bashishing had undoubtedly been a crucial figure. Even amongst Yusang's generals, he was one of the best. Wang Chong had not expected that he would appear in front of this Uzun great general that he could only look up to in the past. In all fairness, Bashishing's abilities were absolutely outstanding. On this undeveloped plateau, where the art of war and strategy were not particularly outstanding, it was already rather astonishing that a barbarian like Bashishing could use the art of war of the Central Plains to this level. Alas, against a saint of soldiers like Wang Chong, he was only displaying his slight skill before an expert. Ha ha ha, good. What a fine only by knowing yourself and your enemy can you be invincible. Bashishing's eyes flashed with a strange light at Wang Chong's words. I truly underestimated you in this war. I didn't think that a brat like you who still smells of your mother's milk would have such a level of skill in the art of war. But don't get too happy. The news of our defeat here will quickly spread to the Arai plains. The great general will quickly lead his army north. All that awaits you is death." A sinister smile appeared in Bashishing's eyes, his expression cold and cruel. He had never feared death. The people of Uzan would never be sacrificed for nothing. Even if they killed him, they would still have to accompany him in death. "Haha, are you talking about this?" Wang Chong chuckled and raised his gaze to the sky. "Whistle." The nearby eagle stuck 2 fingers into its mouth and let out a shrill cry. Clap. At almost the same time, a black shadow flashed and something dropped straight down from the sky, landing in front of Bashishing. That scarlet-green feather, sharp claws and teeth. It was clearly a ferocious heliotrope. It was just that his neck, which used to hang in the air, was now broken. Even his sharp eyes had turned dull and colorless. Bashishing instantly paled at the sight of this sea-green beast. Hai Dongqing was a tyrant in the sky. It could capture eagles, sparrows, and pigeons. It had very few enemies in the sky. Even many eagles were no match for it. Bashishing had not expected his opponent to be so powerful that even Uzan's pride, Hai Dongqing, had been killed. Don't be too pleased with yourself. It was just a green sea estuary. An army of tens of thousands of people, such a huge matter. Do you think we only have one Hai Dongqing? It's useless even if you manage to intercept this green heliotrope. Bashishing quickly raised his head, a look of disdain on his face. Clatter, clatter, clatter. As Bashishing spoke, the sounds of falling rain came from all around him. Green heliotrope after green heliotrope fell to the ground, smashed into meat paste. At the sight of these heliotrope, Bashishing's face instantly turned ashen, the cruelty on his face vanishing without a trace. Ha ha ha. The sight of Bashishing's ashen face caused the crowd to roar with laughter. Bashishing, you're thinking too simply. In terms of aerial killing, how could any of you compare to me? The eagle roared with laughter. His right hand reached into the gray chain at his waist and took out a handful of rabbit jerky and tossed it into the air. Screech. With a series of sharp cries, one shadow after another shot down from the sky, catching the rabbit jerky thrown by the eagle. They quickly took to the air and vanished. If one looked carefully, they would discover that these birds were rather small, but their beaks and claws were covered with sharp blades. And when they flew, they cooperated with each other like a small army. This was the eagle's hunting team. In the Central Plains, there was probably no one who could compare to the eagle in the art of eagle taming. Scouting, sending messages, hunting, disguising, all sorts of subdivisions have been developed by the eagle to a fairly perfect degree. These smaller falcons were a mixture of the genes of all sorts of vicious birds, and they had all been carefully selected. The eagle had spent some years and 5 or 6 generations of selection before it could be considered a success. Although they had no means of scouting, were not proficient in bird language or signals, and could not pass on military intelligence from the front lines. But they were superior in their ferocity, bravery in battle, and tacit cooperation. In the air, there was basically no one who could match them, and in order to increase their killing power, the eagle had even fitted them with metal claws, metal beaks, and special metal spikes on their wings. One could easily imagine their power. This journey to the southwest was fraught with danger, and no one knew if they would ever return. Thus, the eagle had brought along almost all the birds it had raised. Haha, how about it? Now you're not going to say anything? Wang Chong grinned. So what if you killed all those turtle doves? All you did was drag out your feeble existence for a few more days. Bashishing closed his eyes, looking like he could be killed or tortured as he pleased. Do it. I'll be waiting for you underground. After saying this, he closed his eyes and remained motionless. Haha, even if you want to die, it won't be that easy. Tell me, where did your people come from? I'll give you a quick and painless death. Wang Chong said. Why are you asking this? I won't tell you. Bashishing suddenly opened his eyes, a hint of wariness in them. Haha, is it Chilichuan? Wang Chong suddenly said, shooting a glance at Bashishing. Bzz. Bashishing said nothing, but his face darkened. He opened his mouth, wanting to say something, but Wang Chong's sword had already pierced through Bashishing's heart. I already know. There's no need for you to say it now. As the little yin-yang sword stabbed in rumble, the last of Bashishing's majestic and pure blood energy surged through the little yin-yang sword and into Wang Chong's body. Wang Chong had already broken through to Tier 6 of the true martial realm, and now that he received this fierce energy of the profound martial realm, it was like he had been given a shot of adrenaline. The stellar energy in his body boomed and exploded. Ah! With a shrill and painful scream, the crown Wang Chong was wearing burst open. Thousands of strands of black hair flew into the air like steel as a bloody mist exploded out of his body. Under everyone's shocked gazes, Wang Chong's energy broke through from Tier 6 of the true martial realm to Tier 7, Tier 8, and finally stopped at Tier 9, almost the same level as the eagle. How is this possible? Seeing Wang Chong's transformation, the eagle's eyes went wide. He had accompanied Wang Chong this entire time, so he was well aware of the changes in Wang Chong's strength. At the start, Wang Chong had just been an insignificant Tier 1 or 2 true martial realm martial artist, but now, with just one stab of Bashishing's sword, he had broken through several layers and was now on equal footing with him. It had to be known that the eagle was already in his 30s, almost 40, and Wang Chong was only in his teens. The two of them could not be mentioned in the same breath. Just what sort of evil art are you cultivating? Bashishing fell to the ground, his eyes wide and filled with shock. A furious, dying voice came from the ground as Bashishing lay on the ground, his eyes wide with shock. Life and death were decreed by fate. Since he had failed, he had no hope of surviving. He wanted to meet the commander who had defeated him. In the end, the only thing that awaited him was death. But Wang Chong's sword had completely shattered his fantasies. Bashishing could sense the energy in his body rapidly flowing into the body of this youth of the Tang dynasty. He was rapidly raising an opponent, an extremely terrifying opponent. If Wang Chong had only been intelligent before, then right now, his body was rapidly exuding the aura of a seasoned top-class expert. This was not something a teenager could have, and he didn't need to undergo any sort of transition or tempering at all. Bashishing had never encountered such a strange phenomenon in all his years of experience. Ha ha ha, about this, do you want to go underground and ask? Wang Chong laughed and pulled back his right hand, pulling the little yin-yang sword out of Bashishing's body. Blood spurted out, and Bashishing collapsed to the ground without so much as a groan. And Wang Chong was in no mood to look at him. Bashishing's strength was far more tyrannical than he had imagined. Right now, this enormous energy was rampaging in his body, making Wang Chong feel like he had to vent it out. In a flash, Wang Chong seemed to have found that feeling of looking down on the world and galloping unhindered through it all. From the beginning to the end, he had never been a simple strategist. Leaping dragon spear. The mountain suddenly whistled as Wang Chong raised his hand over his back and pulled out a golden spear with 7 red tassels. Roar! A heaven-shaking roar rang out. Before everyone's shocked gazes, a lifelike and mighty 5-clawed azure dragon coiled in the air and charged up from the ground. 1 coil, 2 coils, 3 coils. Finally, with a boom, it transformed into a dazzling bolt of golden lightning that crashed into the mountain. Rumble! The heavens swayed and the earth quaked. Dust churned, and the entire mountain trembled under Wang Chong's spear. Countless stones and stones were sent flying in every direction, and the entire mountain seemed like it was on the verge of splitting apart. What sort of spear art is this? When did young master learn such a tyrannical spear art? As they gazed at the thick cloud of dust rising several dozen zhang into the air, not only the eagle, Zhao Jingdian, and the others, but even the future invincible great general Li Sai found it hard to conceal their shock. A moment ago, Wang Chong had only been at Tier 5 of the true martial realm, but by the end of the battle, he had instantly reached this level. The power of that spear had definitely reached the profound martial realm. Chapter 514. The howling winds blew away the dust on the summit, revealing a massive pit at the summit. When Wang Chong walked out of the dust, spear in hand, the entire mountain was silent. At this moment, Wang Chong was powerful, confident, and brimming with dignity and aura. He had the air of a powerful leader in general. This was completely different from the impression the crowd had of Wang Chong at first. In terms of aura alone, Wang Chong had risen from the crowd, rising to the same level as the eagle and Li Sai. Just what sort of technique is this? It's too shocking. Although the Wang clan is a clan of ministers and generals, I've never heard of this sort of technique. If he continues to advance at this rate, young master's martial arts will reach an astonishing, inconceivable level. Everyone looked at Wang Chong walking out of the summit, their eyes filled with reverence. But even though they were surprised, even shocked, no one brought it up, and no one went up to ask. Many people even subconsciously lowered their heads when they saw Wang Chong, intentionally ignoring the matter. No matter what technique Wang Chong cultivated, no matter how he came to be, no matter whether he was good or evil, at a time like this, as long as Wang Chong could continue to improve himself, it would benefit everyone. As for everything else, it didn't matter. What the Southwest War needed the most were experts, and the more the better, the stronger the better. Congratulations to user for killing Bashishing and changing the course of history. You have been rewarded with 5 points of destiny energy, to be distributed at the conclusion of the trial mission. On the mountain, Wang Chong had just emerged from the crater created by the leaping dragon spear. He hadn't gotten very far when he heard this voice. Haha, it's the same thing again. Wang Chong paused. Bashishing was one of Huashu Wuzong's capable generals, one of the best in the Southwest campaign. However, before the Annam Protectorate was annihilated, he died in his own hands. His fate had obviously changed. At the very least, he had changed his fate. Based on the rules of the past, the Stone of Destiny would definitely reward him with destiny energy. What truly concerned Wang Chong was that this was the second time he had received a reward of destiny energy, but he hadn't distributed it. During the trial, the distribution of all destiny energy points had to be delayed. However, every time a group of people died in Lion City, Wang Chong's destiny energy would be continuously deducted. My lord, the eagle Li Sai, Zhao Jingdian, Su Shiping, and the others stepped forward to welcome him. Everyone inadvertently glanced at the little Yin-Yang sword hanging on Wang Chong's neck, and subconsciously avoided this question. No one said anything. Young master, you just asked Chilichuan what was going on? The eagle softly said. Wang Chong's question had caused Bashishing's complexion to change completely. But crucially, the eagle still didn't know what was going on. Bashishing wasn't even afraid of losing his head. So how could a single question from Wang Chong cause his expression to change? Moreover, what did Chilichuan mean? Why had Wang Chong asked this question? Even now Old Eagle was still confused. Haha, you'll know in a little while. Commandant Su, Bashishing is dead, and Xiangyang Dalu has also been killed. We've already broken through the Uzun defense line in the middle, and only the last mountain is left. Pass on my order. Tell the other 2 groups to meet up with us as quickly as possible. Today, we will destroy the last of the Uzun cavalry as quickly as possible. Yes, my lord. I've already notified them. As long as we succeed, we will send a signal to them. I trust that they've already set off. Commandant Su clasped his hands and bowed. His tone and expression were extremely respectful. After this battle, there was no doubt that Wang Chong had won everyone's respect and trust. Facts spoke louder than words. Bashishing had died, Xiangyang Dalu had died, and more than 10,000 Uzun soldiers had died, while their side had only lost 2,000 some men. In the face of such a matter, even the harshest person would willingly prostrate themselves in admiration. Time is of the essence. Commandant Su, where's the sand table? Wang Chong said. Bring the sand table up. Commandant Su waved his hand down the mountain. Very quickly, a few soldiers carried a large metal box and ran over. The chest opened, revealing a complete map of the Southwest. There were 2 most valuable things in the army, the Commander-in-Chief's seal and a sand table. After placing the sand table in front of Wang Chong, the 2 soldiers quickly retreated. With the defeat of Bashishing and Xiangyang Dalu, the 2 most important passes on the sand table had been opened. What appeared before Wang Chong was a vast expanse of flat land. There were no longer any threats on the road south. And with the 3 armies gathered, the remaining 6,000 Uzun soldiers were no longer a threat. Most importantly, after this experience, These reserve soldiers had already established their confidence in the Uzun. This was the most crucial point right now. Li Sai, Wang Chong suddenly said. In a moment after we've destroyed that Uzun army, do not linger for a moment. Take those hired experts from Xiaolong and head here. Wang Chong jabbed a finger at the sand table as he spoke. This, with a single glance, Li Sai was struck dumb. The place Wang Chong had pointed out was not some important pass. And it wasn't even on the road leading south to the Arai Plains. The two were completely off course. Young master, this isn't the road to Lion City, Li Sai said in a daze. Even though he had been with Wang Chong for a very long time, Li Sai still couldn't understand what Wang Chong was doing. This was completely different from what he had expected. Wang Chong said nothing, only waved his hand. Li Sai hesitated for a moment, then quickly bent down and listened attentively. Wang Chong whispered in his ear, then patted Li Sai's sturdy shoulder. Go and make your preparations. This matter is much more important than what we're doing right now. You're the only one by my side who can do this, and make me trust you. When Wang Chong said this, his face was solemn. It was too difficult to change the outcome of this war, with only 1,000 people. To do a good job, one must first sharpen his tools. The upper party attacks the conspirators, and the lower party controls the soldiers. Wars were often not determined by the military strength of the two sides, but also in some places that ordinary people couldn't see. Rumble. After some simple preparations, the army quickly set off for the last place, where the Uzun army was stationed. Chapter 5:15. After descending the mountain and traveling several hundred li, Wang Chong's forces quickly encountered a second group of reinforcements. The commander of this group was Su Chunan, a veteran general of the army. The two armies merged into one, and Wang Chong's soldiers instantly swelled from 5,000 some to more than 11,000. This was the first time Wang Chong had more than 10,000 soldiers under his command. Although it seemed like an increase of only 3,000, the slightest difference could lead to a difference of 1,000 li. For a top-class great general, the more soldiers Han Xian had the better. With more than 10,000 soldiers under his command, his ability to strategize was completely different. With these 110,000 soldiers, Wang Chong would have much more leeway to mobilize and utilize them. Wang Chong had been able to easily defeat a fierce Uzun general like Bashishing and his 10,000 some soldiers with only a few casualties, so it was even easier to deal with the remaining 6,000. The following battles were much simpler. Without Bashishing and without Xiangyang Dalu, the remaining Uzun force did not last very long before being easily destroyed by Wang Chong's force, which was twice its size. This battle proceeded even faster than the first battle. In just 2 hours it was over. My lord, your subordinate will take his leave first. Even though the battle was over, Li Sai did not relax in the slightest. Wang Chong's battle had ended, but his battle had only just begun. But even Li Sai was at a loss as to what he was going to do next. Go. What comes next has nothing to do with you. Wang Chong nodded from his horse, his expression unperturbed. Li Sai could not see the slightest hesitation on his body. He always seemed to know what he was doing, and what he was going to do. Li Sai could not see the slightest confusion on his body. This gave Li Sai a little more confidence in this operation. I'll leave this silk bag to you. Wang Chong removed a bag from his waist. Judging from the knot on the bag, this bag seemed to have been prepared a long time ago. If your operation is successful, Uzun's men will definitely split up to deal with you. No matter what, you have to remember, don't be greedy for battle achievements, and don't let your emotions affect your decisions. I have already stated everything clearly on the brocade pouch. You must act strictly according to the note in the brocade pouch. Speaking of this, Wang Chong's expression was extremely solemn. Wang Chong had always respected Li Sai, but it was precisely for this reason that Wang Chong's solemn expression left a particularly deep impression. Yes, I understand. Li Sai took a deep look at Wang Chong. Then, he quickly took the brocade bag from Wang Chong's hand, lowered his head, and performed a military salute respectfully. Don't worry, young master. No matter what, I will complete the task strictly. Let's go. After saying that, Li Sai waved his hand and led more than 1,000 elite cavalrymen, all armed to the teeth, galloping away. Behind him, the air was still thick with the stench of blood. Young master. Even farther away, Commandant Su, Zhao Jingdian, and Eagle watched Li Sai's departing figure, confusion in their eyes. Li Sai's mission this time was extremely mysterious, and his route was completely different from everyone else's. Other than Wang Chong, no one knew where Li Sai was going at such a crucial moment. This was far too confusing, but even so, no one dared to doubt Wang Chong's decision. Wang Chong's prestige in the army had reached a level that not even Su Shiping could match. With a single word from Wang Chong, Su Shiping's subordinates would immediately follow him. Not even Su Shiping would be able to stop them. This wasn't because they weren't loyal enough, but because Wang Chong had used his strength and 3 victories to win their heartfelt support. At this point, no one cared about Wang Chong's age, surname, or background. Even without the token of the King of Song, no one would disobey his orders. Wang Chong had used absolute strength to win the right to command this army. Army, move out. There was no time to lament the severe effect Li Sai's departure would have on the army. After cleaning up the battlefield, Wang Chong gave an order and led his army south. With this victory, Wang Chong's journey south was finally cleared of all obstacles. There were no more obstacles between Wang Chong and the Annam Protectorate. Time was of the essence. This time, Wang Chong didn't linger. Sir, is it convenient? The journey south was dull and lonely. Just as Wang Chong was pondering alone on his horse, he suddenly heard a voice as soft as an ant's. Commandant Suanduan rode his horse. When no one was paying attention, he pretended to casually lean over. Suanduan respected the youth beside him from the bottom of his heart. Although they had only known each other for a short time, and the other party was probably about the same age as his own child, Suanduan didn't dare to treat him as a child. Instead, he wholeheartedly submitted to him and treated him as the true commander of this army. But it was precisely because of this that Suanduan felt that he had to say something. This subordinate has something to say to Sir. Commandant Su, what's wrong? Wang Chong turned around and asked in surprise. Suanduan was secretive when he spoke. His eyes were filled with worry. Sir, forgive this subordinate for being rude, but there's something I've thought about for a long time, and have to say. This subordinate believes that our biggest problem right now isn't Uzan, but the problem of food. Suanduan stammered for a long time, before finally spitting out the last 4 words. What followed was a long period of silence. Continue. Wang Chong finally came back to his senses, but he didn't say anything. He only gave Suanduan a look. Sir, to tell you the truth, if you hadn't appeared, even if Uzan didn't attack us, we wouldn't have been able to hold on for long. I don't know if Su Shiping has told you, but their situation isn't much better than ours. 5,000 to 6,000 soldiers, men and horses aren't a small number. Although we're generals and have no fear in charging and breaking through enemy lines, logistics isn't our forte. Furthermore, Suanduan glanced at Wang Chong, hesitated for a moment, then gritted his teeth and continued. Before that battle, this subordinate had unintentionally heard General Li mention that the Annam Protectorate had asked the court for help. Their rations probably wouldn't last for long. Soldiers and horses haven't moved, but rations and fodder have to move first. We only have 10,000 people, but the Annam Protectorate in the southwest has so many people. I'm afraid. Suanduan didn't continue, but the worry in his eyes was clear. He had actually noticed the army's rations a long time ago, but he didn't say it out of fear of shaking the morale of the army. In the battle with Uzan, we lost too much of our supplies and weapons. As for our rations, they were almost burned down by the Uzan. The rations we have on us are only enough for a few days. If Sir hadn't appeared, we would have already prepared to return north. But now I'm not going against Sir. But with our current situation, whether we encounter the Uzan or not, I'm afraid only death awaits us. After saying this, Suanduan sank into a long silence. Even the emperor doesn't use hungry soldiers. Although martial artists possess great strength, they were still mortals and needed to eat. If the army didn't eat their fill, It would be good if they could use 50 to 60% of their strength, let alone fight a battle. This was suicide. Suanduan originally didn't want to say it, but as a general he had to say it. The Tibetans were secondary, but the matter at hand was of the utmost urgency, a problem that had to be considered. You don't have to worry about this. To his surprise, when Suanduan mustered up the courage to speak of this matter that would clearly affect the morale of the army, Wang Chong faintly smiled and said something that no one could have imagined. It's just some rations. You don't have to worry about it. I have my ways. But sir, even if we ask the court for rations now, it's too late. The emperor is far away, and the capital is too far away. Moreover, the gathering of rations requires the cooperation of the 6 bureaus and the mobilization of rations from various parts of the Tang dynasty. The entire process is time-consuming and laborious, and distant water can't put out a nearby fire. Suanduan was getting more and more worried. Judging from Wang Chong's relaxed expression, it was clear that Suanduan's words had not entered his ears. This worried him even more than the army's lack of rations. Food is the most important thing to the people, and this applies to the army as well. If this problem was not resolved, the army would rebel. My lord, we have to be cautious in this matter. Suanduan truly felt like his internal organs were on fire. He truly couldn't understand why he had made his words so clear. Why was Wang Chong so calm? Relax. Distant water can't quench a nearby thirst, but nearby is different. While I was still in the capital, I already began to mobilize rations. Relax. After so long, it's about time. Wang Chong stretched out his arm and patted Suanduan on the shoulder, a faint smile on his face. Although it was just a few indifferent words, Wang Chong's expression exuded a formidable self-confidence. It was like he had a plan in his grasp, and nothing could escape his calculations. Even Suanduan was momentarily stunned. Food for tens of thousands of people was no small matter. For the War of the Southwest, the imperial court would need to prepare at least a month's worth of rations. This was no small matter. It would take at least 2 or 3 months, at the very least 4 or 5 months. Suanduan truly couldn't imagine just where Wang Chong was going to get so much food. This was not a problem of money, but of such a large opening that no single grain merchant or clan could resolve. Even those traveling merchants and clans that specialized in grain needed a long time to prepare, and they would never be able to get this much. Suanduan's mouth moved, as if he wanted to ask something, but Wang Chong patted him on the shoulder, and then swaggered off. A plan in a tent can determine victory from 1,000 li. This was an important aspect of the art of war. How could Wang Chong make a mistake on a problem like rations? Although rations were a major issue, he might be able to accomplish something that the imperial court couldn't. Zhang Munian, I can only rely on you for this. Chapter 516. In this era, other than martial prowess, there wasn't much difference between this era and the space-time that Wang Chong knew of. No matter how powerful one's martial arts was, it was impossible to increase the production of food. Thus, when the Central Plains fell into chaos, and that calamity descended, the Central Plains were filled with starvation and panic. Even Wang Chong's army had been suppressed by this, and in the end, they were defeated and killed. With such a bitter lesson in mind, Wang Chong had been preparing for this very moment. And Zhang Munian was the foreshadowing that Wang Chong had prepared for this. The hybrid rice had already begun to take shape, and Wang Chong had written a letter to Zhang Munian long ago to have him send some rations over. As for the rest, Wang Chong had left it to Zhao Qiqin to handle. If even this future queen of logistics couldn't solve the problem, Wang Chong really couldn't think of anyone in the world who could solve the problem of rations for the army in this urgent situation. Suanduan sighed inside. He didn't believe that he would be able to solve a problem that even the royal court couldn't. But looking at Wang Chong's expression, it didn't seem like he was faking it. Given his identity and capability, there was no need for him to do so. I can only take it one step at a time. Suanduan thought as he suppressed the thoughts in his heart. After destroying the 18,000 Uzun cavalrymen at the 3 passes, there was no longer anyone who could threaten Wang Chong and the others. In truth, other than a few scattered soldiers, they didn't encounter a single Uzun soldier at all. The army's advance gradually picked up speed, but after passing the pass, 800 li later, the atmosphere gradually grew tense. The joy of victory from defeating Batunlu, Bashishing, Xiangyang Dalu, and the others had vanished without a trace. The army was no longer in the mood to joke and laugh. In the end, even the eagle's face was gloomy and he fell silent. The atmosphere was extremely oppressive, like something was hanging over their heads. Although the Uzun soldiers could no longer be seen on the road to the south, the traces they left behind could be seen everywhere. Abandoned military supplies and weapons were everywhere. Messy highland steeds' hoof prints extended from the official resting point to the depths of the forest, and at every set distance, one could see the stoves that the Uzun had started. It wasn't just one or two, nor was it a few hundred or a few thousand. It was a vast expanse that stretched as far as the eye could see. The charred marks clearly showed how huge the Uzun army was. This was the Uzun army that had truly routed Li Jingyi, and the one leading this army was none other than the Uzun great general, Huashu Wuzong. Although Bashishing and Batunlu were famed generals, in the end, they were nothing more than generals under Huashu Wuzong's command. Even the 3 divisions of Uzun cavalry guarding the pass had been left behind by Huashu Wuzong. To the Uzun army, the deaths of Bashishing and the others were negligible losses. Although Wang Chong had defeated Batunlu and Bashishing, Huashu Wuzong was not them. How could an existence that even a tiger of the empire, like Zhangqiu Jinxiong, be so easily dealt with? If they were to encounter Huashu Wuzong now, all of them would be doomed. The majority of these people had participated in that sort of battle, so they had a deep understanding of how terrifying the Uzun army was. It was easy to imagine what they were feeling now that they saw the tracks left behind by the Uzun army. I wonder how the elites of the Annan Protectorate are doing. I hope that they haven't suffered too many casualties. I wonder if we can make it in time. We only have 10,000 some people. I wonder if we can help them. We can only rely on Milord for everything. It was no secret that the 500,000 soldiers of the Uzun army and the Mengshi Zhao army were working together to threaten the Annan Protectorate. When they thought about the difficulty of the road ahead, all of them felt their hearts sink. From time to time, they would subconsciously glance at Wang Chong. With the road ahead uncertain, Wang Chong had become their spiritual sustenance. After experiencing so many fierce battles, no one dared to doubt Wang Chong anymore. Even though he was far younger than these people, Wang Chong's composure, and wisdom had long been imprinted in their minds. No matter what appeared before them, as the commander-in-chief, Wang Chong seemed to always know what he should do, and what he should do. It was as though nothing could defeat him, and nothing could make him hesitate. At this moment, his disposition as a commander-in-chief was of utmost importance. Time flew by, and the army traveled day and night toward the south. The further south they went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. Wang Chong could clearly sense the change in the atmosphere, but Wang Chong said nothing about it. I wonder how Li Sai is doing. Judging from the time, he should have reached there by now. On the back of his horse, Wang Chong raised his head and suddenly thought of the departed Li Sai. It was normal to be hesitant and suspicious, so Wang Chong did not try to persuade him. Everyone thought that they were the main force in this trip to the south, but only Wang Chong knew that the real main force was actually the 1,000 men led by Li Sai. More importantly, at this moment, except for Wang Chong, even Li Sai himself did not know what he was doing, let alone what it meant. Hiya! Wang Chong squeezed his horse's abdomen and accelerated forward. Time flew, and his eyes moved away from the road to the south, passing over many hills and plains, all the way to the west. At a place more than 2,000 miles away from Wang Chong and the others, Nei's warhorse neighed, and more than 1,000 Tang dynasty cavalrymen were lined up neatly with murderous intent, waiting for something. Someone bring the things up. Li Sai put the narrow piece of paper in his hand back into the cotton sack, then raised his head and waved his hand to order. Clang clang clang. With a clattering of metal, several upright Tang dynasty cavalrymen quickly brought up a large metal chest from the rear of the procession and placed it on the ground. Bzz. The moment the chest landed, it was like a mystical curse had swept through the crowd. The atmosphere suddenly became strange as all eyes curiously stared at the chest. Although their mouths said nothing, their eyes betrayed them. Besides the life-and-death battle, the most mysterious thing on this journey was the metal chest that Wang Chong had given to Li Sai. Before leaving the capital, Wang Chong had ordered his men to prepare it. From that moment on, no one was allowed to approach it except for the 2 soldiers escorting the chest. Not even Zhao Jingdian or the Eagle, who had served Wang Chong for a very long time, had the right to open it. Not only that, Wang Chong had ordered that the escorted chest be 80 meters away. Even at the height of the war, they had been given special permission not to participate in the battle. This made the crowd's curiosity rise to a peak. We can finally open it. I wonder what young master has placed inside. Why hasn't Milord opened it yet? The crowd's curiosity was unbearable, and from time to time, they would glance at Li Sai. Open the chest. Li Sai didn't care too much about it. With a wave of his hand, he swiftly issued an order. Frankly speaking, the curiosity in his heart right now was not any less than the others. But more importantly, not even he knew what was hidden inside. Wang Chong's ability to keep secrets was truly too good. Wonderful, the crowd cheered. But Li Sai glared at them, and they immediately quieted down. Clack! With a crisp sound, the box opened, and countless pairs of eyes instantly looked over. A few soldiers even blocked Li Sai's line of sight. However, just when everyone was filled with hope, the surroundings suddenly fell into silence in the next moment. This is a bag. The crowd looked at each other. There was nothing in this mysterious chest, only a grayish-brown, old linen bag. Ah, it stinks. Suddenly, the crowd retreated, as if avoiding the plague. At first, they didn't feel it, but now that they were close, everyone could smell the stench, as if it had been rotting for a long time. What exactly is inside? The experts from the aristocratic families had been trained by Wang Chong, but at this time, they all pinched their noses and retreated. After all, Li Sai wasn't Wang Chong. Although he was strong and looked dignified, he was still from the military, and didn't have the wealth and unreachable status of Wang Chong. Most of the time, other than during training and battles, Li Sai's attitude was actually quite friendly, so in front of him, the crowd usually didn't have so many scruples. Li Sai didn't say anything, but he was just as surprised as the crowd. Wang Chong had given him this mission, and not even Zhao Jingdian and the Eagle, who were close to him, had a share. Furthermore, Wang Chong had said that this mission was extremely important, and they had to act according to the instructions on the silk pouch. Li Sai only thought of opening the chest after arriving at the destination. Given how long Wang Chong had spent to prepare such an important item, Li Sai didn't believe that there was only a bag inside. Gallop! The warhorse sneezed as it slowly approached the metal chest. After a moment of silence, Li Sai grabbed the Wuxia steel sword on his back and casually swung it. Shua! Before anyone could react, Li Sai's Wuxia steel sword had already cut open the sack inside the chest. Voila! A large pile of pitch-black, moldy meat mixed with bones poured out from inside. Seeing this sight, everyone was stunned. What is this? Why did the Lord give the general this? The crowd couldn't react at all. Even Li Sai's mind went blank for a moment. But soon, a thought flashed across his mind. Li Sai's eyes narrowed, as though he had understood something. Mutton! Li Sai suddenly understood what this meant. Even though it was impossible to tell what this pile of meat was, from the slender bones, Li Sai was able to recognize it at a glance. This was a sheep, and an adult one at that. Li Sai had spent quite some time in biting, and he had seen many herds of sheep, and eaten a lot of mutton. When he ate the fragrant and greasy roasted mutton, he would eat it with the bones, so Li Sai couldn't be more familiar with this. But this wasn't any ordinary mutton. This is a sheep that died of plague. Chapter 517. From now on, no one is allowed to come close without my order, Li Sai suddenly said. My lord. Those who disobey will be executed. Li Sai slashed with his right hand. The giant Wuxia steel sword in his right hand emitted a beam of sword energy that slammed into the ground with a boom. Rocks and dust flew everywhere, leaving a deep sword mark on the ground. In an instant, everyone was as silent as cicadas out of fear, subconsciously backing away. "Yes, my lord," someone said in a low voice. Li Sai would never deliberately put on airs, but if he was serious, it meant that this matter was very serious. At this time, no one dared to provoke him. "Young master, is this the key to the war you told me about?" Li Sai said to himself. At this time, he already understood why Wang Chong had left this box for him. Sheep plague rarely occurred on the grasslands, but when it did, it was a disaster. Unlike the people of the Central Plains, the people of the grasslands did not know much about medicine or prescriptions. When sheep died of the plague, they did not know how to bury the corpses like the people of the Central Plains. Coupled with the herds of the grasslands, the number of cattle and sheep could reach tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions, or even more. So when sheep plague occurred, it was a large-scale disaster. For the people of the grasslands, this was absolutely a matter that would make them pale. But the grasslands had always been hostile to the Central Plains. Moreover, cattle and sheep fed on water. After eating one place, they would move to another. Their mobility was especially high, so sheep plague rarely occurred on the grasslands. Many herdsmen did not even know what sheep plague was. This also allowed the nomads of the grasslands to be taken advantage of. The significance of this thing that Wang Chong had prepared was self-evident. In the past, Li Sai would have vehemently opposed it. But now, the 180,000 elites of the Protectorate of the Southwest had been routed, Li Jingyi's 60,000 reinforcements had been ambushed, and the Tang dynasty had opened its gates to the southwest. Nearly 1 million people had no shelter, and were completely exposed to the allied forces of Mengshi Zhao and Uzun. At this time, if he was still soft-hearted and cherished his reputation, he would be pedantic. Kindness to the enemy is cruelty to oneself. But is this really useful? Li Sai sighed in his heart. Even if he understood the purpose of these things, Li Sai still didn't understand the purpose of Wang Chong's arrangement. Whether or not the sheep plague could cause any harm was a matter for the future, but the crisis of the Southwest Army was right before their eyes. Moreover, even if he completed his mission, Uzun's army would not suffer any losses. Was this really going to work? "Coming, bring me a bag of food." Li Sai took a deep breath and suddenly said, "Yes, my lord." Soon, a soldier came over with a bag of soybeans and rations. Li Sai did not let anyone participate. He mixed the bag of soybeans, peas, and rations into the mix. Buzz! After doing all this, Li Sai suddenly flicked his wrist, sending out a burst of stellar energy that slammed the lid shut. He then raised his head and looked into the distance. Looking from here, herds of cows and sheep could be seen wandering in the dense grass in the distance. They were like clouds, vast and boundless everywhere. If one looked carefully, one could even see shepherds in the midst of the flock. Their highland steeds were tall and sturdy, and as they stood in the midst of the flock, they were extremely conspicuous even from a great distance. Only the shepherds of Yusang would be able to ride these horses to herd their livestock. In a war between two armies, since you dare to help the army, you are our enemy. Don't blame me for everything. Li Sai stared at the distant shepherds, his eyes flashing with cold light. "All soldiers, hear my order. Don't let a single Uzun person go." Li Sai restrained his aura, his entire body suddenly turning icy cold. "Yes, your excellency." With the order, the army responded loudly. In the next moment, more than 1,000 elite cavalry sped up, stirring up clouds of dust as they charged into the distance. "Ah, it's the Tang people. Let's go." Waves of screams came from afar. The shepherds of Chilichuan were in a panic. Many shepherds drove their flocks of sheep away in an attempt to escape, but it was already too late. At this moment, the two countries were at war. How could Li Sai give them a chance to escape? Rumble! The sound of horse hooves became even more urgent. Along with the sound of horse hooves, no one knew that behind the Uzun army, another war had already begun. Before the troops and horses move, the provisions and fodder move first. This was a principle that had never changed since ancient times, and it was also recorded in military books and strategies. However, this was only the military books and strategies of the Central Plains. For the Uzin people and the other tribes of the grasslands, this had never been a problem. Wang Chong had once researched and discovered that the logistics of the Uzin people were completely different from the logistics of the Central Plains. For a large-scale war, the Central Plains needed 2 to 3 years to prepare, and this long period of preparation could only last for a few months. Once 3 or 4 months passed, the war could no longer be fought. When the Tang dynasty was first founded and Emperor Taizong was still on the throne, the Tang dynasty was at its peak. However, in the war against the Goguryeo Empire, the Goguryans had fortified their defenses and cleared the fields, and the Tang dynasty's logistics were unable to keep up. After 4 months of fighting, the Tang dynasty was forced to retreat due to a shortage of food, ending this war that had involved so many troops and consumed so much of the country's resources. However, these 4 months were already the longest battle in the history of the wars between dynasties in the Central Plains. And for this reason, the Tang dynasty had even stockpiled food for 3 years in advance. For the dynasties of the Central Plains, this sort of war was not something that could be easily carried out. But the people of the Uzin and the Turks were different. If they wanted to wage a war, they could move over 1,000 li at any time without worrying about logistics. If they were like the Tang dynasty, subjected to so many restrictions, and had to prepare so many years in advance, the people of the steppe would have long since lost the ability to fight, and it would have been impossible for them to become a threat to the Tang dynasty. In the end, it wasn't that the people of the Uzin and the Turks didn't have food problems, but that their eating habits were completely different from the people of the Central Plains. The people of the steppe mainly ate meat, and eating meat for every meal was no problem at all. But for the people of the Central Plains, if they ate meat for every meal without any other staple food, they would definitely be very excited at the start and eat to their heart's content. But after 3 or 4 days, they would immediately get sick of it, and after a month, their army would no longer have any fighting strength to speak of. The staple foods of the people of the Central Plains were rice, chestnuts, millet, sorghum, and other such foods, so their habits were naturally different. And the storage, transportation, planting, and cooking of these foods were all extremely troublesome and time-consuming. Not to mention that the people of the Central Plains were particular about matching meat with vegetables. They cooked, boiled, steamed, deep-fried, and scorched various cooking methods. There was only rice and no meat. There was no taste in his stomach, and he would be soft when fighting. Therefore, when the people of the Central Plains fought, they always had the habit of having a big feast before a big battle. There was a saying, "Only when you are full will you have strength." The people of the Central Plains were used to this. Regardless of whether it was the god of war, the saint of war, or the ancient grandmasters of the path of war, none of them could do anything about this situation. They could only go with the flow. That was why there was a saying in the books of war, "Before the troops and horses move, the food goes first." This was their nature, and how could they change it? However, the people of the grassland were different. Their eating habits were far less complicated. It was fine as long as it was cooked, and it didn't even matter if it was raw. When the army moved out, the Shepherdians followed behind. The army became the Shepherdians' solid support, while the Shepherdians drove herds of cattle and sheep in the rear to provide rations for the army. Cattle and sheep graze on grass. They don't need plowing, or a large amount of water. They don't need several months to mature. More importantly, the cows and sheep would never go moldy, and there was no need to worry about food storage. Wherever the army moved, the cattle and sheep would follow. There was no such thing as stale, damp, or moldy food. As long as there was grass, the army would never lack rations. Moreover, the army of the grassland people came from the Shepherdians. They were now logistics officers and shepherds, but in the future, they would be the army. Because there were too many cattle and sheep, the people of the grassland could even butcher them and make jerky, which they only needed to rub salt on. This was the case for both the top-notch experts and the ordinary herdsmen. In this world, the only things that could truly affect them were the extreme winters and frost. Wang Chong had once thought about it carefully. Of all the options for war, only logistics happened to be the one that the people of the grassland needed to worry about the least. It was the same for the Turks, and it was the same for the Uzan. In terms of logistics, the agricultural people and the nomadic people were naturally unequal. Therefore, the nomadic people didn't have the weapons and equipment of the dynasties of the Central Plains, nor did they have as many people. They didn't have as brilliant a culture, and they didn't know any military books or strategies. However, they could still become a threat to the dynasties of the Central Plains. In the history books of the dynasties of the Central Plains, it was always recorded like this. In a certain year, the Turks invaded the border, or in a certain year, the Uzan raided the border and left after reaping the rewards, or in a certain year, the border of incontinent, Yuzhou, or some other place was invaded by bandits. Such records could be found everywhere in the history books, and there would never be an end to them. But this aspect of the nomadic people of the grassland could still be exploited. If they could circle around the army at the front and reach the herdsmen at the back, killing all their sheep, they would suffer a heavy blow. Under normal circumstances, this would be impossible to achieve. The people of the Uzan would never give the Tang dynasty such an opportunity. But now, the people of the Uzan were all drawn to Lion City. Li Jingyi had already been eliminated, and the pass was guarded by the armies of the Uzan in 3 places. For the people of the Uzan, the rear of the army was already impregnable, and there was nothing that could threaten them. This gave Wang Chong the best opportunity. And these sheep that had died of plague were the best gift that Wang Chong had prepared for the people of the Uzan. The flock of sheep of the Uzan was simply too large. Unlike the people of the Central Plains, no one ever said that they had a few sheep, or a dozen, or even dozens of sheep. The nomadic people had always herded hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, or even millions of sheep. This was something that the farming people of the Central Plains could never imagine. Moreover, the nomadic people had another characteristic, and that was that they lived in tribes. When herding sheep, they naturally lived in tribes. Therefore, there was no such thing as how many sheep a person reared. It was all about how many sheep a tribe reared. And this number had always been extremely large. When the number reached a certain level, sneak attacks would become useless. The shepherds could even ignore everything and leave the sheep to be slaughtered. Hundreds of thousands of sheep stood there motionlessly, and even if they killed them from dawn to dusk, they wouldn't be able to kill them all. And when Li Sai and the others left, the shepherds could come back at any time. At that time, all they had to do was turn the slaughtered cattle and sheep into jerky. This kind of sneak attack would lose all meaning. To deal with the people of the Uzan and attack the sheep in their rear, ordinary methods would be useless. Therefore, they had to take an unconventional approach. And these sheep that had died of plague were the gifts that Wang Chong had prepared for them. When a sheep was infected, it would quickly spread to the entire flock, from one tribe to the rest of the tribe. More importantly, the people of the grassland didn't know how to deal with the sheep plague, and didn't have the habit of burying it. This meant that an independent matter could easily turn into a huge disaster in the end. When dealing with the enemy, one couldn't just be superficial. One had to make them feel pain that reached deep into their bones. Only then would they learn their lesson. War wasn't just a battle of military strength, nor was it a battle of fists against flesh or blades against swords. It was a war of strategy. At this moment, other than Wang Chong, even Li Sai himself didn't know that if his plan succeeded, what awaited the people of the Uzan would be a huge disaster that would last for years, or even decades. Chapter 518. Screams and screams could be heard everywhere. Soon a massacre began in Chilichuan. A large number of herdsmen in the tribe fled, while some of the herdsmen chose to resist. However, this resistance was nothing in front of the cavalrymen, who were equipped with meteoric iron armors and Wuxia steel swords. It was like scratching an itch through the boots. In the midst of the bleeding, the cattle and sheep fell to the ground. Blood stained the ground. In this war, there were no civilians, no warriors. There was only a game between countries, a battle of life and death. In this fateful battle, no one was innocent. Righteousness does not control wealth. Mercy does not control troops. Today's herdsmen would turn into cruel Uzun warriors who slaughtered civilians in the blink of an eye tomorrow. Any mercy to the enemy would be cruelty to one's own people tomorrow. The battle went on quickly, and it ended just as quickly. When the Chilichuan, which was close to the Uzun, was filled with blood mist, Li Sai and his people had already left in a hurry, heading to a faraway place. Behind them, there were corpses everywhere, as well as the carcasses of many cattle and sheep. Herds of cattle and sheep covered the plains, stretching as far as the eye could see. However, even the future omnipotent general would not be able to wipe out hundreds of thousands of cattle and sheep in an instant. After the massacre, there were still a large number of cows and sheep left on the ground, all of them bleeding. Except for them, no one knew what had happened. The Chilichuan was quiet, as if time had stopped. After an unknown amount of time, puff, a pile of Uzun corpses suddenly flipped over. Under the blood-stained grass and trees, a trembling hand reached out from the ground. Devil, these Tang people are all devils. The heavily injured Uzun herdsman sat up from the pile of corpses, muttering in Uzun language. Their pale eyes were still filled with fear. Nightmare. Only a nightmare could explain what had happened to them. 600 to 700 tribesmen couldn't even last one round before they were all slaughtered by these people. Not a single one of them was injured. Although he knew that the other party was a regular army, the difference in strength was too great. Moreover, didn't they say that the Annam protectorate of the Tang dynasty had been defeated? Didn't they say that the 60,000 reinforcements of the Tang dynasty had been annihilated by the great general? Didn't they say that there were 3 generals guarding the 3 passes from the north to the south? Why would a horseman of the Tang dynasty appear here? Didn't they say that the rear was absolutely safe? No, I must tell the great general. Let him send people to encircle and annihilate all these Tang people. The surviving herdsman got up to leave, but after taking 2 steps he hesitated. No, we must inform the great general, but we must inform the other tribes as well. The Tang people had already appeared in Chilichuan. This place was no longer safe. I need to find a way to inform them as soon as possible. The surviving herdsmen thought to themselves. On the plateau, there was no such thing as a herdsman. Herdsman was just a Han term. All the people of the Uzun were natural warriors. When not in battle, they were the support of the army and the logistics officers of the army. When in battle, they could also be the eyes and ears of the army. All the herdsmen and the army were together. After looking around, the surviving herdsmen quickly focused their attention on the cows and goats that had survived the ordeal. The Tang dynasty was no longer safe. If there was a first army, there would be a second, a third. These cows and sheep couldn't stay here. They had to rush to the Uzun plateau in the rear. Moreover, when the people of the other tribes saw these ownerless sheep, they would definitely understand what had happened here. This way they would also be vigilant. This was the unwritten rule of the plateau. Smack! Filled with fear and anger, the herdsman whipped the sheep and began to drive them away in a frenzy. Let's go! Let's go! Don't stay here! Get out of here! Flocks of sheep were driven to various places on the Uzun plateau. An old horse knew its way. Sheep were not so smart, but by following the water and grass, they could still find the path they had come from. As long as those people saw these sheep, they would understand. Bah! Amidst a series of bleating sounds, the remaining sheep spread their hooves and ran in all directions. However, the herdsmen who were immersed in their anger and fear did not notice that among the snow-white sheep, there were a few cows and sheep chewing on the soybeans that Chilichuan did not have. Those soybeans were mixed with some black powder. The sheep scattered, and the cows and sheep mixed in with them as they vanished into the distance. At the same time, in the distant capital, there was also a great deal of activity. Wang Chang's departure with his 1,000 fully armored clan experts had not attracted much attention. This had never been the focus of the imperial court's attention. The southwest, Longxi, Anxi, Baiting and Ong. In all the years since the founding of the Tang dynasty, it had never encountered such a dangerous situation. In its golden age, the barbarians around the Tang dynasty were all extremely submissive. Normally, Not even a single one of them would rise up in revolt, much less be besieged on all sides. Right now, the Tang dynasty was no longer worried about the southwest, but the entire empire. The most worrisome thing was that from all directions the barbarians might join hands and attack them. If the current situation continued to develop, it was very likely. Is there any news of Chong'er? Wang Zhen was anxiously pacing back and forth in the Wang family residence. The moment he opened the door and saw a guard enter, he immediately went to greet him, his eyes brimming with anxiety and concern. It had been some time since Wang Chong had left, but there had been no news at all. Wang Chong had left very suddenly, leaving without even saying a word to him. But Wang Zhen could not say that he was completely unaware. Back then, when Wang Chong had contacted the great clans to forge large quantities of armor and weapons, he had already made this clear. In fact, the thick smoke that filled the entire capital was produced for Wang Chong. There were probably very few people in the capital who did not know this. But even so, this did not mean that Wang Zhen was not worried about this nephew of his. The only member of the Wang clan who was able to suppress the scions of the capital and become famous at such a young age was Wang Chong. Wang Fu, Wang Li and Wang Bei, none of them could do the same. But even so, Wang Zhen would not stop him. The Wang clan was a clan of generals and ministers, and no one, male or female, was a coward. Without this strength of character, they could no longer be considered scions of the Wang clan. But to say that Wang Zhen was not worried about this nephew of his was a lie. "My lord, there's no news." The guard who entered the residence lowered his head, not even daring to breathe too loudly. "We've tried to use carrier pigeons to contact young Master Chong, but we couldn't get in touch with him. In addition, we couldn't get in touch with the eagle breeder at young Master Chong's side either. We feel that young Master Chong and the others have already entered a state of war. They've probably sent those eagles out to scout as well. That's why we lost contact with young Master Chong." Buzz! The word war caused Wang Zhen's body to tremble, his hands and feet to turn cold. "Have the experts we arranged already set out?" "Yes, my lord. They've already set out for the southwest 2 days ago." The guard lowered his head and said, "Tell them to find Chong'er, and then bring him back safely no matter what." Wang Zhen sternly said. "In addition, contact the third master's residence. Chong'er has so many subordinates. If we contact them, we should be able to get in touch with Wang Chong. No matter what, I have to know where he is and how he's doing." "This, my lord, I'm afraid that we still can't get in touch with him." The guard hesitated, and a hesitant look appeared on his face. "To tell the truth, my lord, young Master Chong's subordinates are no longer under our control." "What?" Wang Zhen's brows finally shot up. "What's going on? What do you mean by no longer under our control? Is it impossible to get in touch with them and find Chong'er through them?" "My lord, to tell the truth, although young Master Chong didn't leave the capital with all his subordinates, he passed down an order before he left that after he left, everyone in the Wang clan residence, Deflecting Blade Manor, and the Spirit Vein Mountain, had to obey the orders of the talented daughter of the Su clan, Su Yiqin. No one was allowed to disobey. And 7 or 8 days ago, the guards of young Master Chong's residence were transferred out of the capital by Lady Su. No one knows where they went, and we can't find them even if we wanted to. The Wang clan residence has no one but a few Imperial Army soldiers that were transferred over. The guard lowered his head. On the other side, Wang Zhen was dumbfounded. Su Yiqin? Wasn't this the talented daughter of the Su clan? Even he had heard of her talent in the capital. Wang Zhen had never known that even Su Yiqin had become Wang Chong's subordinate. My lord. "Ah, I know, there's no need to worry about it. Let him do whatever he wants." Wang Zhen finally came back to his senses and waved his hand, saying no more. Since Wang Chong had already made arrangements for his departure from the capital, there was no need for him to worry about what would come next. At the same time in the capital, while everyone was panicking, a fragrant and scholarly study of the Su clan was tranquil and quiet. Red sandalwood flowers and trees, bookshelves filled to the brim, a few pots of black plums, a cranebeak incense burner emitting the fragrance of ambergris, and an elegant woman sitting behind the desk. This place was like a quiet harbor. No matter how big the storm outside was, it was all blocked outside. This was Su Yichin's study. Ever since Wang Chong left, all sorts of documents had been piled up in Su Yichin's study. Smiths, swordsmiths, merchants, grain merchants, porters, horse merchants, all sorts of documents, involving the thousands of swordsmiths in the capital, the 4 swordsmithing clans, and the several dozen large and small merchants and grain merchants, all of which involved hundreds of thousands of people, had been piled up here. From the inspection of goods, supervision, and explanations with the great clans, to the payment of the wages of the workers in the grain shops and merchants, everything had been piled up in Su Yichin's hands. Gathering the grain from all over the country and transporting it to the southwest was no simple task. Far too many people needed to be contacted. In the imperial court, this would require the cooperation of the several hundred offices and bureaus of the 3 provinces and 6 ministries. But now, all of this had been gathered in Su Yichin's hands. The floor of the study had long since been a mess, but Su Yichin's desk was always neat and tidy. All the documents were categorized and placed neatly on her desk in an orderly manner. She had used the simplest, most efficient, and most frugal method to deal with all the documents. If one looked carefully, one would also realize that Su Yichin's desk would always have 8 or more cases on it at the same time. Photographic memory and multitasking might have been difficult for others, but for Su Yichin, who was renowned for her talent and could challenge Wang Chong in chess, this was no problem at all. Chapter 519. The brush in Su Yichin's hand moved swiftly, as if all the answers were already in her mind. There was no hesitation. All sorts of trivial matters came one after another, but Su Yichin remained calm and wise, maintaining a calm and composed demeanor. It seemed like nothing in the world could trouble her. I wonder how he's doing. After some time, Su Yichin suddenly sighed, raised her wrist, and put down her brush and chopsticks. In the clash at Deflecting Blade Manor, she had once more lost to Wang Chong, and even been humiliated by Wang Chong. She, who had always been proud and arrogant, had no choice but to lower her head and agree to Wang Chong's request. Logically speaking, she should have hated this scoundrel to the bone. But for some reason, when she thought of the situation in the southwest, and how Wang Chong could face the combined army of Mengshi Zhao and Uzun, Su Yichin's mind was in a mess. For some reason, Su Yichin recalled the 4 words Wang Chong had said to her on the day he left. "I believe in you." Wang Chong had said these 4 words with extreme solemnity. In the final moment, Su Yichin had seen Wang Chong's resolute and determined figure, leading countless clan experts down the mountain and disappearing into the southwest. At that moment, he had clearly understood something, but he had still chosen to leave without the slightest hesitation. He was like a moth flying into the sparks of a bonfire. At that moment, Su Yichin's eyes were wide open, her heart moved like never before. In Su Yichin's mind, Wang Chong had always been a selfish and smug person, who didn't know what was good for himself, an unforgiving, extremely conceited person, who only knew how to oppose her. This was the first time Su Yichin had seen this other side of Wang Chong, this other side of herself that had been buried deep in his bones. This side of him was so alluring. Don't die. No matter what, don't die. Su Yichin turned her head and looked through the window at a map on the wall. On the map, several places were marked conspicuously with needles and red ropes. The map was left behind by Wang Chong before he left. Other than Wang Chong, only Su Yichin knew what those marks represented. All the merchant caravans, horse caravans, and camel caravans had already set off. All the merchant caravans in the capital had been mobilized by her, not to mention the local clans and wealthy families. Only she, Su Yichin, could do all this and handle everything in an orderly manner. War equipment, rations, everything had been set out. Hundreds of merchant caravans, packed densely together like ants. Day and night, they surged towards that place without stopping. Judging from the time, the first batch of supplies should have already arrived at the location designated by Wang Chong. From now on, you can only rely on yourself. Su Yichin took a deep breath, turned her head, and continued to work on the documents on her desk. In the southwest of the empire, the sky was gloomy. The clip-clop of horse hooves was accompanied by flying grass and mud on the official road. Warning! Counting down. There is still half a day left. If user cannot reach the destination on time, he will be obliterated, and the trial mission will be a failure. Warning! The Annam Protectorate has suffered heavy damage. 20 points of destiny energy have been deducted from user. Warning! User must increase his speed as quickly as possible. If the speed is less than 20 kilometers per hour, 15 points of destiny energy will be deducted for every 2 hours. Warning! A string of messages flowed through Wang Feng's mind like a waterfall. As the army headed south, everything seemed calm, but only Wang Feng knew that this was far from being the case. In just a few short days, 80 points of destiny energy had been deducted from Wang Chong. He had defeated Batunlu, defeated Bashishing, and broken through the pass to the south. But to Wang Chong, the undercurrents were even more turbulent. Wang Chong did not understand what had happened to Lion City. The city was clearly fortified. So why had so many points of destiny energy been deducted from him in such a short period of time? The situation in the southwest was still worsening, and the constant deductions of destiny energy in his mind were reminding him that this was far from the end. The stone of destiny was still tightening the pressure on him. But at this moment, Wang Chong was far from worrying about himself. Rather, he was worried about the Annam Protectorate in Lion City. Father has already reached that place. I hope I can make it in time, Wang Chong quietly said to himself. His goal in this journey was not to protect himself, but to save the Annam Protectorate in the southwest. If the Annam Protectorate was destroyed, then everything would be meaningless. All soldiers, hear my order. Everyone advance at full speed. Wang Song brandished his long sword and took the lead in charging forward. The 300,000 Mengshi Zhao soldiers and the 200,000 Uzun soldiers were like a mountain weighing down on Wang Chong's chest. The closer they got to the south, the deeper they went into the Arai, the closer they were to danger and death. The victories they had won earlier did not mean that the situation had improved. On the contrary, it meant that they were under even greater pressure. This rapid march of several thousand li had never been a simple rescue mission. If they weren't careful and were discovered by Mengshi Zhao, then the 10,000 soldiers led by Wang Chong could be crushed like eggs at any moment. Whoosh! Dark clouds gathered in the sky. At some point, a gust of wind had blown in from the south, carrying with it the thick scent of blood. This was the scent of the southwest battlefield. It seemed that this place was already not too far from the Arai. Wang Chong stopped. Seated on his horse, he raised his head to glance at the sky. Dark clouds hung low in the sky like waves. The air was suffused with an oppressive smell, as if something would sweep down at any moment. This was the smell of a storm. It's going to rain. Wang Chong looked at the sky and muttered to himself. He was no stranger to this smell. Unsurprisingly, the southern plains had already welcomed a storm, and this storm was rapidly approaching from the south to the north. My lord, our brothers can't hold on much longer. Should we rest here for a while? As Wang Chong was deep in thought, he suddenly heard a voice at his ear. Amidst the clattering of hooves, Su Shiping and Su Onduan rode over from behind. My lord, our brothers have already been on the road for several days. I know that my lord is anxious, but without sufficient information, I'm worried that even if our brothers reach the Arai Plains, they won't be of much help. Su Onduan clasped his hands and bowed his head. Brother Su is right. Our brothers truly do need information. Su Shiping glanced behind him and echoed his words. The soldiers of the army were all typical martial artists, and they were definitely much stronger than ordinary people. But no matter how strong they weren't made of steel. After so many days of constant travel, the army was already exhausted. A casual glance behind them would reveal the weariness of the army. This was a very dangerous situation. The two commandants had clearly reached an agreement on this point. No, now's not the time to rest. Wang Chong turned his head, his tone firm and unquestionable. The army truly was very tired. He didn't even need to think to know this. But now was not the time to rest. A person's potential was limitless. On the battlefield, one could not wait for one to eat their fill, have enough strength, and rest before fighting again. This was what war meant. In the dynasties of the Central Plains, a war would last for several days and nights, and there were many battles without rest. Would they have to retreat halfway through the battle? What Wang Chong was worried about was not whether the army would rest or not, but that Lion City would fall by the end of the day. If the Southwestern Protectorate army was completely wiped out, then even if they had enough rest, it would be meaningless. Boom! Before Wang Chong could finish speaking, a bolt of lightning flitted across the sky, slithering through the dark clouds like a silver snake. With a plop, a bean-sized drop of rain fell onto Wang Chong's face. Turning his head, Wang Chong subconsciously wiped away the raindrops on his face. Su Shiping and Su Anduan also shut their mouths and subconsciously looked up at the sky. This was the first rain the pair had encountered since their journey south. Plop! Plop! At first, it was just a few drops of rain, but as more and more came, they grew larger and larger. In the blink of an eye, a torrential downpour began to descend from the sky. The rain droplets were as dense as a curtain, and as they fell on the armors of everyone, they produced a continuous metallic clanging sound, like a musical movement. It was raining. 1, 2, 3. The soldiers raised their heads to look up at the torrential rain, and all of them were left dumbfounded. This heavy rain was definitely not within everyone's expectations. No one knew what this heavy rain meant. Wang Chong, Su Shiping, Su Anduan, and all the others were dumbfounded. Heavy rain, 3 days, the city is breached. Wang Chong muttered to himself as he gazed at the sky. A thought suddenly flashed through Wang Chong's mind, and his body trembled in understanding. Su Shiping, Su Anduan, I'll only give you 15 minutes to rest. The eagle Zhao Jingdian, take all the cavalry and follow me. Yes, my lord. Rumble. Before many people could react, Wang Chong, the eagle, and Zhao Jingdian had led the remaining 2,000-some cavalry into the rain like a bolt of lightning, quickly vanishing. What are you waiting for? Didn't you hear? Rest where you are and eat some rations. Prepare to follow at a moment's notice. After a long pause, Su Anduan suddenly turned his head and sternly said, although he didn't know what had happened, the change in Wang Chong's expression made Su Anduan certain of one thing. Something had definitely happened, even though he still didn't understand. Plop! In the torrential rain, Wang Chong and his 2,000 cavalry formed a long line as they galloped through the rain. Thunder rumbled in the sky, but the voice in Wang Chong's mind was even louder than the thunder. 3 days! 3 days! Wang Chong had never understood why the Stone of Destiny had given him 3 days to get within 100 li of Lion City, until Wang Chong saw this majestic downpour. If everything went as expected, the war in the southwest was about to undergo a massive change. It wasn't that Lion City was breaching, but that the Annam Protectorate was breaking through. The rain continued to pour, casting the world in a hazy haze. Not even Wang Chong's eyes could see very clearly. From 10-some meters away, it was impossible to tell whether it was a mountain or a tree, a road or a person. If the Annam Protectorate wanted to break through, today would be their best chance. It seems like they're running out of rations. Wang Chong lowered his body as these thoughts flitted through his mind. Lion City is sturdy, but its biggest problem is rations. If they run out of rations, Lion City will be building a cage of its own. Thus, the Annam Protectorate must break through. Xingyu Zhongtong definitely won't have this sort of courage. He's a general who defends what he has. And if he can defend it, he won't leave so easily. To be so determined to break through, unless, as this thought flashed through Wang Chong's mind, he thought of his father and brother. If Xingyu Zhongtong was alone, he definitely wouldn't break out of the encirclement. But the Annam Protectorate still had his father and brother, Wang Yan. With them around, the situation would be completely different. This was especially true for his brother Wang Fu. Although Li Jingyi was hailed as one of the younger generation of the Tang dynasty, and death was the most important thing, no one could say anything about it. But in terms of strength, strategy, and skill in the art of war, Wang Chong had always firmly believed that his brother Wang Fu was the true number one. Compared to Xinyu Zhongtong, his brother was more daring and meticulous, and he was definitely more adventurous and enterprising. If it were him, he would definitely be able to do it. Moreover, this rain was a heaven-sent opportunity. Wang Chong was confident that his brother, Wang Fu, would not remain unmoved by such a downpour. It's not the city breaking, it's not the city breaking. It's the initiative to break through. As he looked at the curtain of rain, Wang Chong's heart trembled with excitement. The eagle, lead the way with the giant eagle. In addition, send another giant eagle to contact Commandant Su, and the others at any time. Wang Chong suddenly said. His body was already completely soaked. Rainwater seeped in through the gaps in his armor, then seeped out through the gaps below. Even his boots were covered in deep puddles. But Wang Chong no longer cared. Hiya! Squeezing his horse's abdomen, Wang Chong charged forward with all his might. Almost at the same time, screech! Two giant eagles flew diagonally through the curtain of rain and soared into the sky. One headed south, the other north, and they quickly disappeared into the curtain of rain. Wang Chong would never have imagined that Lion City would break through much earlier than he had imagined. Gallop, gallop! The sound of hurried hooves could be heard amidst the torrential downpour. In just a few moments, an Uzun scout rushed into Huashu Wuzong's line of sight. How is it? Huashu Wuzong's gaze was like lightning, as he swept his gaze over the scout from atop his horse. Around him, the rain was as dense as a curtain, but all of the rainwater was bounced off when it was still 10 zhang away from him. Even now, the ground beneath Huashu Wuzong's feet was still dry and impatient. My lord, we've fallen into a trap. The Annam Protectorate didn't charge out from the west gate at all. We followed them out, but there were only a dozen or so Tang soldiers. The scout's face was covered in rainwater. It slid into his eyes and blew into his nose. He didn't even dare to wipe it off. In addition, the rain is too heavy. Quite a few of our brothers got lost in the rain. Bastard! Huashu Wuzong was furious. The scout's expression froze. He lowered his head and didn't dare to say another word. My lord! My lord! Before Huashu Wuzong could get angry, another Uzun cavalryman galloped over. Before Huashu Wuzong could open his mouth, he shouted. There's no sign of the Tang dynasty's main force at the east gate. The scouts from the north gate and the south gate had returned, but none of them had found any trace of the Tang army. The Uzun army had split into 4 groups to pursue the Tang army from the 4 gates, but none of them had found any trace of the Tang army. Bastard! Huashu Wuzong's complexion turned extremely unsightly. There was no need to think too much about it. He was certain that he had been played. Xinyu Zhongtong definitely would not have been able to think of this plan, to open 4 city gates in succession, and then send soldiers to charge through the city gates while the waterfall was pouring down, forcing him to split his forces into 4 groups. Moreover, he definitely did not have the courage to do this. Having fought with Zhangqiu Jinxiong for so many years, Huashu Wuzong was well aware of his subordinates. My lord, is it possible that the Tang army is still hiding in the city? An Uzun soldier cautiously asked. Huashu Wuzong said nothing, only glared at him. The Uzun soldier's expression froze. He immediately realized that he had said the wrong thing. If the Annam Protectorate was still in the city, opening the gates like this was no different from inviting thieves to their deaths. What about Zheluoch? Hasn't their army moved out yet? Huashu Wuzong asked, suppressing his anger. Meng Shizhao had an army of 300,000 soldiers. With their cooperation, the Annam Protectorate wouldn't be able to escape no matter how capable it was. My lord, the king of Meng Shizhao has sent word that his army is currently in chaos. In addition, he sent word that this torrential rain is having an even greater effect on them than on us. Our cavalry are nimble, and the king of Meng Shizhao hopes that we can lead an army to pursue the Annam Protectorate army and not let them escape. Huashu Wuzong didn't say anything. The surroundings were deathly silent. Only the pitter-patter of the rain and the cracking of Huashu Wuzong's fists could be heard. At this critical moment, not a single one of Meng Shizhao's 300,000 soldiers could be counted on. There's no need to count on him. Zhelifeng didn't say anything about this matter. The rain was boundless, and visibility was obstructed. Meng Shizhao mainly consists of infantry, and the ground is muddy. Right now they can't even take care of themselves. They don't have the strength to pursue. At this moment, a calm voice came from the side. This voice contained a strange power. Like a pond after autumn, it could soothe all the anger in one's heart. At this moment, only the Prime Minister of the Uzan Empire's Ngari royal lineage, Dalawan Ruozan, could say something like this. Prime Minister, are you still speaking up for Meng Shizhao at this time? Huashi Wuzong said coldly. A military general wouldn't understand the other's standpoint. Since Meng Shizhao wanted to form an alliance with Uzan and borrow Uzan's strength, they needed to show that they believed in the strength of their side. I'm not speaking up for them. This rain has completely ruined our plans. Dalawan Ruozan gently put away his white feather fan. As he gazed at the dense curtain of rain in the sky, a strange expression appeared in his eyes. In this battle with the Annam Protectorate, as long as these remnants were eliminated, Uzan would obtain a complete victory. From then on, the Tang dynasty wouldn't be able to contend against Uzan in the southwest for the next few decades. But this heavy rain was like a bucket of water splashed onto a chessboard. It splashed away the chess pieces, messed up the chessboard, and disrupted his plans. Xinyu Zhongtong doesn't have this ability. In Lion City, perhaps only the Wang father and son can be so decisive. Chapter 520. Wang Yan and his son were not as famous as their father, Duke Jiao, in the Tang dynasty. However, as a general, Wang Yan was famous for his ability to fight. His military tactics were both offensive and defensive. Although he lacked flexibility, he was truly invulnerable. The army had besieged the city for so many days without any results. This was where the problem lay. Report. Traces of the enemy have been discovered. A large breach has appeared between the east and the south of the city. There is a gate at the breach. Many muddy horse tracks have been found below. As they spoke, the sound of galloping horses could be heard. Amidst the splashing rain, an elite cavalryman of the Uzan Protectorate rushed over. Before the horse came to a stop, the cavalryman dismounted and knelt on the ground, his chest rising and falling rapidly. Buzz! In an instant, the surroundings were silent. Whether it was Huashi Wuzong or Dalawan Ruozan, they all fell silent. The army of over 200,000 soldiers split into 4 groups and chased through the 4 open gates. But in the end, they all failed. The Annam Protectorate actually escaped through one of the city walls. This was something that no one had expected. Without a doubt, they had been played. Zhang Shouji. The sound of the rain drowned out the thunder. Dalawan Ruozan slowly raised his head and looked at the towering silhouette of the city in front of him. A thought flashed through his mind. A gate was hidden in the solid city wall. This had nothing to do with the war. It was the masterpiece of the city's architect. It was no secret that Liu City was built by the architect of the Tang dynasty, Zhang Shouji. The Tang dynasty of the Central Plains is really full of talents. Dalawan Ruozan sighed deeply. Even as the enemy, Dalawan Ruozan could not help but admire the Tang dynasty's wealth of talents and culture. It was not something the Uzan Protectorate could compare to. Unfortunately, even so, it is useless. Let them escape for a while and be happy for a while. Huashi Wuzong, I'll leave the rest to you. Huashi Wuzong just sneered and said nothing. The torrential rain was indeed the best cover for the Annam Protectorate. Even they had no way of knowing when the Tang army would break out, and their eyesight was so poor in the pouring rain. However, if the Annam Protectorate thought that they could escape so easily, they were gravely mistaken. If they had defended the city, they might have been able to live for a few more days. However, they actually thought of abandoning the city and running away. That's simply courting death. Someone, blow the horn and summon the army. Huashi Wuzong flung his cloak and left through the curtain of rain. Woo! Not long after he left, a bleak and sonorous sound of a horn rang out on the plain of Arai. The sound traveled 100 miles and was completely different from the ordinary horn. Even the dense curtain of rain couldn't block it. Following the loud and clear call of the formation, thunderous hoofbeats could be heard from all directions, and the densely packed Uzan swarmed over once again. Traces of the Communist Party have been discovered. An hour later, with a burst of noise, the atmosphere of the southwest suddenly changed, and a tense pursuit began. At the same time, on the other side of the Arai Plains, Wang Chong was facing another crisis of his life. Warning: user has not yet reached his destination. Distance from Lion City is over 100 li. Warning: the host has less than an hour left. Warning: the trial mission is about to fail. There are still 10 kilometers left. User has not completed the mission and will be obliterated. Countdown: 50, 49, 48. Even with the White Hoof Shadow's speed, getting within 100 li of Lion City in such a short time was still an arduous task. And the torrential rain was also a significant hindrance to Wang Chong. I have to go even faster. Even with Wang Chong's eyesight, he could no longer make out his bearings in this storm. The only thing he could rely on was the shrill cry of the eagle in the sky. Hiya! Wang Chong urged his horse forward like a bolt of lightning. Rays of red light had already appeared in front of him. Everything around him, including the torrential rain, was covered in a layer of flickering bloody light in Wang Chong's eyes. Everything around him slowly grew blurry. Wang Chong knew that this trial mission had reached a crucial point. If he could not reach his destination in time, all that awaited him was death. The matter of the Stone of Destiny was still a secret. Besides Wang Chong, not even the nearby eagle knew why Wang Chong was so desperate. 40:39:38. The Stone of Destiny's cold and emotionless voice resounded in his ears. However, Wang Chong maintained his calm, his face beneath his armor completely devoid of emotion. All his attention was focused on the thick line of blood in the depths of the storm. 100 kilometers. That red light should be the border. I have to get there as quickly as possible. Countless thoughts flashed through Wang Chong's mind. The torrential rain slammed against his armor like iron beads. But Wang Chong had no time to worry about anything else. The halo of Dusk Stallion had already been pushed to its limit. The two halos, one on the inside and one on the outside, rumbled and blew away the surrounding rain. Hiya! Wang Chong pushed the White Hoof Shadow to its limit. Whether or not Little Shadow can escape this calamity depends on you. Wang Chong whispered from atop his horse, his palm lightly patting the White Hoof Shadow's neck. The torrential rain blurred his vision, casting everything in a gray haze. Although Wang Chong could see the red light and vaguely see the border, he could not determine how far it was. At this moment, he could only place all his hopes on the white-hoofed shadow. Nay, nay! The warhorse neighed as fiercely as metal. The white-hoofed shadow seemed to understand Wang Chong's meaning. All the muscles and tendons in its body tightened, and its already extremely fast speed was forcibly increased in this almost impossible situation. It was as if its hidden potential had been stimulated. Boom! The horse's hooves kicked up a waterfall of rain in the mud. From atop the horse, Wang Chong could clearly sense that the white-hoofed shadow was exerting all its strength. Every muscle and every bone was exploding with its potential. But Wang Chong was still in danger. 15, 14, 13, 12. The countdown continued. Not only did the rain not weaken, it seemed to grow even heavier. At the start, Wang Chong could still see 10 meters away. But now, he could no longer see beyond 4 meters. This long-awaited downpour was far heavier than anyone had imagined. In this sort of situation, Wang Chong's judgment was completely off the charts. Without sufficient reference, Wang Chong couldn't even tell whether he was heading east or west. But one day, Wang Chong was certain that the giant arc of red light in his field of vision was growing more and more intense. Without a doubt, the distance between him and the white-hoofed shadow was closing. Little Shadow, I can only rely on you now. Wang Chong's body tensed up as he whispered into the white-hoofed shadow's ear. There was nothing he could do at this point. Even if his martial arts had greatly improved, he still couldn't outrun the white-hoofed shadow. 7654. It was only a short moment, but it suddenly felt like an eternity. Every second was stretched into countless fragments. Finally, Wang Chong could see that giant arc of red light. The light had reached its peak. But from his senses, he could tell that it was at least 50 meters away. There's no time. Wang Chong clenched his teeth. 50 meters was by no means a long distance, But at this moment, it had become a matter of life and death. 50 meters. Wang Chang's heart tightened to the extreme. The white-hoofed shadow's speed had reached its peak, and it couldn't go any faster. User is about to be obliterated. Counting down 3, 2, 1. This was the first time Wang Chong had felt the Stone of Destiny's binding power ever since he had obtained it. Although it gave him a chance to be reborn, it also tied a rope tightly around his neck at the same time. Little Shadow, whether we can succeed or not depends on this. In the blink of an eye, Wang Chong had no time to think. He poured all of his strength into the white-hoofed shadow. Boom! The white-hoofed shadow seemed to sense something. At the last moment of the Hour of Destiny's countdown, the white-hoofed shadow stomped on the ground and soared into the sky like a cannonball. Nay! The warhorse's neighing echoed through the night, and at the final moment before the warhorse soared into the sky, a figure flew into the air. In that final moment, Wang Chong had used all of his strength. This was a gamble of life and death. Wang Chong clenched his fists. Time and space seemed to freeze at this moment. Congratulations to user for arriving at your destination on time. The punishment of obliteration has been lifted. The reward for the first phase of the mission is 200 points of destiny energy, which will be distributed after the trial is over. After what seemed like both an instant and countless centuries, the Stone of Destiny's long-awaited voice finally resounded in Wang Chong's mind, but it sounded very different to him. Rumble! The frozen time began to flow again. Wang Chong somersaulted through the air and landed on the horse's front. That was close. Wang Chong let out a long sigh, his heart pounding. In that moment of life and death, no one but himself knew that he had escaped from the claws of the god of death. Young master! A familiar voice, battered by the wind and rain, came from behind him. The eagle, riding a buckskin horse, had caught up from behind. He looked at Wang Chong with a strange expression. Although the situation ahead was truly urgent, Wang Chong's performance just now had been too strange. It really didn't seem like he was on a normal journey. It was more like something had happened that he didn't know about. Young master, are you all right? The eagle asked hesitantly, as if he wanted to say something. Wang Chong shook his head. Just as he was about to reply, he suddenly heard a high-pitched cry. My lord, there's an enemy up ahead. The eagle cocked his head to the side, but before he could finish speaking, he heard a massive drum beat. Dong dong dong. Each beat was incomparably loud, as if it were pounding on a person's heart. At the same time, the wild wind carried the raindrops with it, carrying the indistinct cries of battle in the distance. Those cries were definitely not the voices of one or two people, but more like the cries of tens of thousands of people. In an instant, the expressions of both Wang Chong and the eagle changed. There was no need to say anything more. Follow me. Wang Chong waved his hand. Without another word, he led the eagle and the black dragon bandit elites that Li Sai had left behind to guard him. Braving the rain, they sprinted in the direction of the battle cries. Woo! As they galloped, the desolate, resonant sound of bull horns came from afar. When dozens of bull horns lined up in a row, even the rain could not stop them. It was Uzin's cavalry. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.